Nope. Okay, there we go. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. So, yesterday we watched a couple videos, obviously. The first was Understanding Queen Marika, Elden Ring lore by Cosmos. Then we segued into Dark Souls lore with Will, Duty, and Suffering by Wenders. Then we ended up finishing off with the parallels between Dark Souls and Buddhism. So, yesterday was a pretty fun day. We didn't get to Moxie Watts's We All Got Bamboozled by Gransax. We might not get to it today just because these other two videos are a little bit longer, but generally I don't feel like I pause Quelaag's videos as long as the other ones because they're pretty factual and I don't have like a lot to critique on them. So I think we should be okay. But for today's schedule, I have up Games That Hide Their Best Moments by Arcane Workshop. And the thumbnail says like why hide a story. I don't really know what to expect on this, but it does seem related to Elden Ring because it's got Elden Ring in the thumbnail. And then after that we have What is the Crucible and Elden Ring in all caps by Quelaag. And then last we have Elden Ring lore We All Got Bamboozled by Gransax by Moxie Watts. So hope you are all doing well. And Mercy, Andrew Hunter, Scaleezy, Mr. Yadaization, Elden Enthusiast, Howdy, Vacuous Zealot, welcome all in. Nice to have all of you again. Howdy, I do have the Bandit Games thing queued up, but it might be a while till we get to it. But yeah, it is on the list now. Vacuous says, the Fire Giants theme has lyrics. It's, I am the final heir of Giant's Flame, the guardianship I bear weighs down like a tremendous gravity. The heir will be met, but not of shadow and death. Are those like Latin translated lyrics? Because I kind of don't trust any of the Latin lyrics because of a few controversies over the years in terms of the accuracy of those translations. Elden Enthusiast doesn't think the OSTs have any of the lyrics except for the Song of Lament. Maybe. I think some of them have lyrics, but yeah, I don't know. Hey, Aaron Weiss, welcome back into the stream. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive on into our first video, Games That Hide Their Best Moments by Arcane Workshop. He who has fortune, may he hide it deep. Oh, crap. Suikoden 2. I was not expecting that as a spoiler. Message. Oh, well, yeah, okay, because it's not like strictly Elden Ring. Oh, I'm excited. For anybody who does not know, Suikoden is unironically one of the best JRPGs ever created. It is probably my second favorite game of all time. I'm waiting with bated breath for Suikoden 1 and 2 to get remade and remastered and released because I'm really excited to be able to share that with with an audience who may not be as familiar with those two games. So, okay. Anyway, this video contains spoilers for Elden Ring, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Disco Elysium, and Suikoden 2. So, I have not played Disco Elysium, so I don't really mind if I get spoiled because it's not something that I have on like my go back and playlist. So maybe this will end up changing my mind, but I don't really mind it for right now. Andrew Hunter has been binging Lore Brain's Lords of the Fallen videos today. You actually really enjoyed them despite not being a huge fan of the game. That's cool. I remember seeing Lore Brain's name. Maybe I added a video by them onto the list, but yeah, I'll need to look into that. Yeah, that's understandable, Elden Enthusiast. I need to do these streams kind of late in the night, so that way the animals can be chill and not bother me as much during the stream. Howdy says, you don't think the lyrics in the Dark Souls and Bloodborne OSTs are accurate? No, like one of them, I know somebody had contacted one of the composers and they asked like what the lyrics were to a video and they're like, it's just gibberish, bro. So yeah, it does. I mean, of course, like the games are the soundtracks are written by multiple composers, so another composer could have done something differently and had like more um what do you call it, coherent lyrics. But even if they did, I wonder like how much guidance they were given by like Miyazaki. I don't think Miyazaki's the one writing the lyrics. Okay, going into the video. So I do try to mention all of the creators of the like videos that I review. A little bit of constructive feedback for Arcane Workshop, I believe it was. Yeah, and this might be like an intentional thing right now because it could be like a flashback type of idea. But if you have your video a little bit like too small to fit the borders of the screen, you could just zoom it in. This happened to me with a lot of my, I think it was my Dark Souls 2 footage, or is it Dark Souls 3? One of the two, where I need to like zoom it in by like 1.05 because I must have screwed up the resolution for something at one point when I was recording. But anyway, that's just been something I've been noticing.
I've played quite unreasonable amounts of Elden Ring these last months, especially for someone who supposedly has a family and a day job. And one of the things I've been enamored by constantly is just how much you can miss in this game. At times, Elden Ring feels almost indifferent about your existence. From Software's contemporary games have always been in a kind of weird dialogue with their player base. The law, best practices, mechanics, secrets, hidden messages and optimal routes stir questions and heated arguments online that often end in either mutual appreciation of the series' attributes or remarks of the circumference of your mama's behind and her assumed taste for raunchy, well-endowed sailors. But one thing everyone seems to agree on is on your first playthrough, you should go into the game blind. The confusion.
You go in blind because your mama is so fat she block out the sun.
The anger, the exaltation, the unyielding need to bang your head against a hard surface are all hallmarks of the authentic soulsborne experience. Life-altering suffering is par for course with these games. Later, much later, after the blind playthrough, then comes the time for min-maxing, completionist runs, optimizing builds, revenge tours and trying out best ways to make the game your bitch.
I like the phrasing of that, of calling them revenge tours, because that is definitely relatable.
But first, you should suffer, confused and not knowing any better. That is the way. From Software seems to focus more into the communal aspects.
That was weird. I'm gonna back up because the subtitles, or not the subtitles, the closed captions had some text, so I wonder if they had like a little bit of an editing mishap. So let me yeah, I'm gonna back up a little bit further. Okay. Let me
Confused and not knowing any better. That is the way.
I'm gonna fast forward.
From Software.
Interesting. All right, let's back it up if I can. Dang. They went by so fast. Okay. That's right. We're looking for the secret lore, the story that's been hidden in this video. Right. No matter how in tune I get with these games, how well I learn their weird idiosyncrasies. Why is this not going forward? Bruh. This is so bad.
And
get into their peculiar flow. The later games still seem to be getting more obtuserish.
to the peculiar flow.
Wait, what is going on?
Every release seems to
I must have like gone way forward. Oh, I think I pressed the wrong button. Okay.
From Software seems to focus.
That is the way. Okay. And I more or less agree with this notion, except for your mama slurs. For all I care.
From Software.
Oh man. She can entertain as many sailors as she wants. It's all love. I'm not here to judge. Okay, I can see why they cut that out then. So that might not have been as much of a mistake. But it's funny because, like, if you're editing a video or, like, uploading one and you have your script and you just upload it in directly without making sure your script matches what you say, you can have artifacts like this left in your video. So we found the hidden story of the video. We did it, guys. Thine mother? Yeah. Welcome back to the stream, Cav.
Software seems to focus.
All right, Elden enthusiast, you have a good night, and thanks for dropping in, even if it was for a brief moment.
More into the communal aspects of these games with each subsequent release, which is a fancy way of saying they are getting more obtuse every new release. No matter how in tune I get with these games, how well I learn their weird idiosyncrasies and get into their peculiar flow, the latter games still seem to be getting more obtuse-ish. Yeah, Dark Souls has some cryptic quest lines that are easy to break. Just loiter around without first doing something else somewhere. The quests can be hard to finish even when you know what you're supposed to do and where you should do it. And the subsequent games just escalate the madness further. By Dark Souls 3 and Sekiro, we are hopping through rings and fetch quests so obscure and tangential it borders on an act of God. Someone ever managed to complete these things without consulting a walkthrough first. But Elden Ring takes it a step further, couple of steps even. It seems to assume you're going through the game as a part of some sort of collective, that you are asking friends, searching for guidance, looking for answers online. I remember getting stuck in Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest for the NES. Yes, I am that old. There was this dead end at the end of the game world, behind a perilous road and a great deal of annoying platforming. The reward for my tribulations was this great monolith of halted progress. I couldn't figure out where to go, what to do, and how to progress. For years, this was the end point of Simon's Quest for me. The great adversary who halted my adventure wasn't death, nor Dracula. It was this goddamn slab of a mountain.
I feel that, and like one of my notorious get stuck on a level for no discernible reason games was Sonic 3, when you get to the carnival zone and you're supposed to hold like up and down to make the stupid like little bouncing elevator platform thing like lower, but there's literally nothing else in the game that would imply that's what you need to do. So I didn't discover that until like years later, and once I figured it out, like I'd kind of already outgrown the Sonic games essentially, and it wasn't even like bittersweet. It was just kind of bitter by the time I like did it. Have I watched Blue Eye Samurai? No.
Years later, I found out how you're supposed to progress. You're supposed to equip this unassuming item and go sit in the corner of the screen. After an inordinate amount of waiting, a whirlwind will arrive to whisk you into the next area of the game.
Yeah, that's a pretty infamous Easter egg. I don't even know if you like what you can really call that. All right. Yeah. No. I saw like the trailer for Blue Eye Samurai. It looked interesting, but I kind of want to wait until like series finish now, because there's so many series that just kind of like end halfway through because they run out of like production costs, I guess. I don't know. Cav feels like the old games would be impossible to progress through without buying Nintendo Power or whatever. But with Elden Ring, the main story is clearly telegraphed. It's just extra content that's obscure. Yeah. Generally, I actually think Elden Ring is better than like Dark Souls 3 because, with the exception of, I would say like Nepheli's Lose quest specifically, all the others are fairly straightforward, with maybe Alexander being a little bit of an exception with all of the random places that he can show up. But on my first playthrough that was completely blind, I did manage to find all of Alexander's spots and all of Millicent's spots, which is kind of crazy that I did, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to wait for like the second season either. I just kind of want to watch completed series at this point. Because even so, all right, I guess I'll go off topic a little bit. So, one of my favorite anime that I've watched is Haikyuu, which is a really, really good anime, and it has 4 seasons, I think. But rather than producing a fifth season, the anime makers decided to tell like the last 100 plus chapters of the damn manga in 1 or 2 movies, which is just a hell of a disservice to what had been a fantastic little slice of life anime. So, yeah, that's kind of why I'm a little bit salty. One of the reasons, at least, that I'm a little bit salty about incomplete shows at this point. Cav got stuck on Golden Sun as a kid because it kept adding new mechanisms you need to progress. But FromSoft games don't really do that. The mechanisms are all very clear and introduced early. Yeah. And as Arcane Workshop was saying, a lot of the stuff is more like the side quests that are more obscure. But even though I disagree that Elden Ring's quests are a little bit worse than the previous games, I do think that overall the game is more obscure than the previous titles. And to say that the latter games are all more obscure, I think is a little bit selective. This what came out like 2 months ago. So yeah, like I don't think like Armored Core is nearly as obscure. I mean, it definitely has like obscure things from the little that I know of it, and Sekiro isn't as obscure either. But Bloodborne is obscure for like all the wrong reasons. I think most of them kind of like being like translation and setting based. So like it kind of works in Bloodborne's favor because the atmosphere like lends itself to that kind of a storytelling. But yeah. DS3 was a weird game. The lore about the Lords of Cinder felt so disconnected. Like, why are the Abyss Watchers of all Lords of all Lords of Cinder? You'll probably need to rephrase that last one, but yeah. It's because they shared their blood and shared their souls, so they kind of all became like one collective being, and that's why they linked together. Kind of like how Lothric and Lorien are two separate people, but are kind of one. That would be like one way of comparing the two, perhaps.
Granted, From Software isn't as trigger happy about these things as Konami in their glory days, but they are still the best in the biz when it comes to hiding intriguing content from the average gamer. It would have been interesting to be a part of the Launch Day Battalion, the D-Day offense against the lands between. How the hell did those poor bastards figure any of this stuff out? I'll never know. How did they realize the other half of this key to this grand lift is located in a small hidden village of the beaten path on the other side of the freaking world, held by an NPC who's disguised himself as a pot? Really, a goddamn pot. And somehow you're supposed to just know to whack him so he'll reveal himself to you and handle his half of the medallion.
I actually don't know why I did that. I think he's like starts talking if you get too close, but he's also glowing, and that was a little bit different. Yeah, so I managed to find Albus, but I'd already screwed up like Nefeli's quest, I think. No, I would need to like look back at my footage, but I think I like missed. Okay. I think I know what it was. Yeah. So I did Stormvale pretty late because I was off on my own side quests. So I came to the Albinoric village before going to Stormvale Castle because I was looking for E.G., the blacksmith that Blythe told me about, because I wanted to upgrade my weapon because I had a bunch of like higher level materials, but not like hardly any low ones. So I figured like EG might be able to help round me out, like sell some stuff, so that way I could upgrade my weapon. And so I came here fairly early-ish, I don't know. And then by the time I finish Stormvale and like set Nefelli's quest further, I didn't have any reason to come back here, so I screwed up her quest line. But to be fair, like her quest line wasn't even finishable when I first played.
How did they find out at the bottom of this optional easy to miss area there's a hidden boss fight? And behind this boss chamber there are not one but two hidden passageways which lead to a finicky platforming section, after which you find yourself staring at a door that cannot be opened.
So I did manage to find the Frenzy Flame prescription, but I did miss the little secret wall to deeper depths. The reason why I found it is because I came back because I like wanted to double check some things in this area, and I was just kind of like absent-mindedly like hopping around, so I jumped on the chest, and then like the wall behind it came down, which was really surprising. But even without that, in the 1.0 version of the game, for whatever reason, after you defeat the sewer moog, the walls just lower on their own. So that would have been a good way for like, you know, the info to get out at least. So I wonder why they removed that. Anyway. DS3 also has a neat feature where it runs better at 4K than 1440p. What a weird game. I think 1440p is kind of like a non-standard resolution despite, you know, being like the monitor resolution. So that doesn't surprise me too much. And also like 4K, if I remember correctly, is literally just a doubling of 1080p. So you just upscale it and it's not as awkward. Whereas 1440p is not. Andrew says, Elden Ring is just way bigger. There's just more to find out, so we've probably discovered a lot more than the other games, but a smaller percentage of the lore in the game, if that makes sense. I don't think that does. I think maybe I'm just not understanding you fully. Jack is a mimic. Well, welcome in. Hold on, let me clear my throat. I've got a little bit of a cold, so my apologies if my voice is all jacked up as we go throughout this stream. You're nervous to ask, but would you consider reacting to your lore video on Renala in the future? You just released it a few days ago, and you're interested in hearing some feedback on construction of your theories. Absolutely, yeah, I don't mind, and anybody is welcome. So if you want to link it in like to the video on YouTube itself rather than the chat, so that way I will remember to like look at it after the stream and add it to my list, I will try to get at that maybe a little bit more in the future. Let me rephrase that. A little more recently? What am I trying to... A little bit closer to the immediate future, I should say. That probably works. Okay. So yeah, and also welcome into the stream. You found Albus and Miss Latenna. So yeah, I did find Latenna first, and Albus, yeah, that was weird. You didn't find the passage to deeper depths until like last month. A friend had messaged me asking if I found the secret passage in the Frenzy Flame prescription. I was like, oh yeah, I found it. And he's like, no, I mean the secret passage. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so that's kind of how I found out about the illusory wall. Alright, going back to the video.
Or, more accurately, good luck opening this door without consulting a wiki. Also, on this floor, there's a third hidden wall.
Yeah, I did not get the door to open because I couldn't proceed with Hayata's questline because Vike couldn't spawn because I'd killed all the bosses in Liurnia. So I thought I was just completely boned out of the Frenzied Flame prescription quest until I went on Reddit and I was like, oh yeah, like you can't do this. And someone's like, yes you can. I'm like, what are you talking about? No, you can't. Like, for X, Y, and Z reason. And they're like, no, just remove all your clothing and stuff, and then it'll open. I was like, are you serious? And then it worked, and I was like, oh, dude, I'm sorry. Thanks for correcting me. So, yeah, there was definitely a little bit of communal sharing of knowledge that propelled our understanding of the game forward, which, you know, isn't too uncommon.
That leads you to another huge hidden area. Oh, and in this easy-to-miss sewer, you can find a NPC whose questline can unlock a new ending to the game. So let's recap. At the bottom of this unassuming well, there are 4 optional areas which can lead to 3 different game endings, 3 secret passages, 1 secret boss fight, buried here for someone to stumble on.
You know, that's a really interesting way to look at it when it's said like that. Yeah. The well thing didn't surprise me. Like, I just jumped down it because I'm kind of always suspicious of it. So I like panned my camera down and it looked like, you know, you could make it. So I did.
I can't shake the feeling when playing these games that once again I'm supposed to just sit in a corner and wait for a Deus Ex Machina to whisk me into some unknown, intriguing segment of the game. By this point, I guess From Software just assumes their fan base consists of devoted members who go through the game hitting every possible vertical surface in search of hidden secrets and treasures. And I guess they are more or less...
Man, I feel called out because I definitely did have the whole Volcano Manor hit the wall 50 times door unlock confirmation video on my channel. So yeah, maybe we just play the game in a fundamentally different way.
less correct in that assumption. I've seen religious institutes with less fervorous members, less eager to suffer for hidden knowledge of the world. The world of Elden Ring is gargantuan. It starts off feeling that way, but then it just expands and expands into every direction as you go on. Liurnia, Caelid, Altus Plateaus, the Weeping Peninsula, the mountain ranges, the capital of Leyndell, the crumbling Farum Azula. And then there's the eternal underground cities and their hidden nooks, crannies and rivers, the Lake of Rot, the Elysium, the deep-root depths. The lands between is just ridiculously large. Elden Ring has over 230 boss encounters, 56 dungeons, all of which are optional, 36 NPC quest lines and 6 different endings. Now, these readings might not seem that substantial. Most of contemporary open-world games provide similar numbers, if not greater. Dozens upon dozens of hours of content, endless seeming lists of quest logs, treasure maps, side activities, scavenger hunts, bandit camps and other points of interest. All of those hundreds of markers on the map just waiting to be explored and unraveled to keep you engaged when you lose your interest in the main campaign. But here's the thing. Elden Ring doesn't have map markers, no quest logs, not one. And the optional content, that's more or less the entire game. Caelid, you don't have to go here. This boss, you don't have to fight him. This huge area covering 1/4 of the game world, you can just ride through it and press on. Compared to its contemporaries, From Software is almost violently indifferent about the crushing FOMO of the avid gamer. Elden Ring just kicks you out of the starting dungeon, out into the blinding light, and says, "Go."
And that's probably one of the most appealing feature of their games. We were talking about this like the other night about how FromSoft sort of revolutionized gaming, but not really, in that they kind of did a little bit of a factory reset on the state of gaming. And the franchise that I think does have some very applicable comparisons to like the FromSoft games and Elden Ring specifically would be the difference between like Elder Scrolls. Well, it's kind of funny. Elder Scrolls, Elden Ring, Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind versus Oblivion and Skyrim, and how more user-friendly they made the games in terms of like adding in those map markers as damn it. Is it Arcane Workshop? I'm so bad with names. Arcane Workshop was just saying, and so when he said that there were no map markers for Elden Ring, I'm like, yeah, there are. You can place them yourself. I wasn't initially thinking just like arrows pointing you to the next direction. So I think that was a little bit not like misleading, but just yeah, I can't think of a better term for it. Mr. Yadization only got the Frenzy Flame prescription door open due to the player messages. And that's another thing that is inherent within like the FromSoft games, which kind of make them slightly more accessible. But I mean, with as many trolls as there are as well, it's very easy to miss out on a lot of info too. Okay.
Here's what you're required to do in order to beat Elden Ring. Gather any of the 2 available 8 great runes. Go to the city of Leyndell and confront Godfrey and kill Margot. Go to the Grand Lift of Rold and get to the mountaintops of Giants. Kill the Fire Giant and burn the Erdtree. Go to Farum Azula and kill the Godskin Apostles and Malekith. Return to Leyndell, kill Godfrey, Radagon, and the Elden Beast. That's not a lot of steps for a game which normal first playthrough ranges from 100 to 150 hours.
I think he missed the part about like needing the first 2 runes. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh, okay, no, he said it. I just kind of zoned out. It's my fault.
Gather 2.
Okay.
This is a hyperbole, of course. Most of the players do see much of the world, even on their first playthrough. First, because you have no idea you're supposed to do any of the things I said earlier, not to mention how to do them. So you'll just end up stumbling around the world from one curio to another. Which leads us to the second point. Most of those curios will kill you. This world is out to get you, and unless you spend your days exploring and looting around, you won't manage to accomplish any of the necessary steps to move forward. So yeah, it's a hyperbole, but it's an interesting one. As From Software's push for player agency, game after game after game, has reached quite grand proportions. Because now, instead of a couple of small, intriguing yet optional areas, the entirety of the world is more or less optional. I'm having a hard time not seeing this as a distillation of sorts, a sharpening of intent. These games have always rewarded tenacity and intent, curiosity. FromSoft's games are really difficult, pun intended, to stumble through casually. They demand their pound of flesh if you wish to see them through. Mastery isn't always required, but paying attention is. If you hearken enough to what the game and its world are telling you, more often than not you're rewarded in spectacular ways. This time the developers just went all the way and ran beyond the horizon with this idea. In my experience, it might not always be the best moments that lay hidden within these worlds, but often they are the most interesting ones. In Dark Souls 1, there's a crow's nest hidden atop the ruins of the Firelink Shrine, accessible through a couple of finicky, well-timed rolls. Make it to the top of the ruin and the nest, and you are greeted with a prompt. Curl up into a ball. If you hang around, curled up into a ball for around 20 seconds or so, the Mother Crow will arrive and carry you back to the Northern Undead Asylum, the tutorial level of the game. Here, some interesting loot and a couple of optional encounters await, but the most important thing in the Northern Asylum is the key item, the Peculiar Doll.
I liked the little visual imagery of him including the whirlwind as a nod back to not knowing you need to just chill out and wait in a specific spot. Yeah, I don't remember how I initially got back to the Undead Asylum, whether or not I waited the whole time or whether or not I looked it up or something like that.
If you make your way all the way to Anor Londo, probably the farthest point possible in the game world, you can open a way to another hidden area. Approach the giant painting in the Great Hall while holding the doll, and you can enter the painted world of Ariamis, a cold, snowy fortress with some nice loot and an interesting boss fight as a reward for your curiosity. At the bottom of
Actually, I don't think I looked it up to get back to the, the Undead Asylum, because I remember going into the painted world before Ornstein and Smo.
Light Town, in the middle of the poisonous swamp, there lays a hollow tree trunk. Within it, a small room and a chest. Behind this chest is a hidden passage that leads to a dead end. But behind this dead end is another hidden pathway. This pathway leads you into the Great Hollow and a misery-filled trek down to the branches of the Great Tree, which are
And I think the way I discovered the Great Hollow was due to the online player messages, and I have no idea how the hell anyone is supposed to really discover it without being online.
Home to one of the most annoying enemies in video game history. Make it through the branches and you're rewarded with a giant mushroom man who one-punch mans you to death provided the chance. But after him, the Ash Lake. An ethereal plain of ashen shores, unending waters and ash trees. The trees rise from the waters high above the skyline, into the other worlds and beyond. Tens, hundreds, as far as the eye can see. There's also music, a rare occurrence in Dark Souls. And
Yeah, I was thinking, like, why is Ash Lake so memorable for so many people? And obviously, I think a big part of that does have to do with the music. And going back to what I was talking about on last night's stream a bit with the whole idea of form and formlessness, the whole, maybe not like the whole reason, but much of the reason Ash Lake is so memorable is because the rest of the game is so muted and intimate in ways that just kind of leave the player alone with their thoughts for the most part. I don't know if that makes like a ton of sense on its own, but without any music to kind of like guide your mood or distract you, you're just kind of all in your own headspace. But when you come down into Ash Lake and you hear that bombastic chorus of deep like male voices and giving this kind of like regal chant, that leaves an impression in a way that is perfectly crafted to like fit that area. And because the rest of the game is so silent, it stands out that much more. Scaleezy says, From style of world building gives the feeling that you're an outsider exploring a land with its own history and stories, like looking through an abandoned building. Yes, and I thought about like pausing the video earlier and saying it. I think one reason why Elden Ring and FromSoft's game approach for the most part resonates with a lot of people is because even though they're in obviously fantastic settings, they're still pretty realistic when you step out of the stranded graveyard, you walk out the door, and then you're presented with the world and not given any clues what to do. I mean, how different is that from me stepping outside my front door and being confronted with the world and not being given any quest markers as to what to do, you know? So the world is what you make of it, both in the game and in real life. So there is a kind of like strange parallel where the lack of tutorialization makes the game a bit more, I don't want to say like approachable, but like relatable perhaps. It's the literal base of the world. Thanks, Beans and Rice. Welcome back to the stream. It's like looking through an abandoned building, as opposed to the other games that feel like they're made to be presented to the player. Agreed. Tree phrase. Frem's games feel like you're discovering something that already exists, while other games feel like they're made to be presented to you. Yeah, that's a really good way to say it, and that is one of the reasons why I like the FromSoft games as much as I do. Because obviously we take it to like the nth degree when we like look at, oh man, there's an astrolabe on the tables here, and we see astrolabes in like Ray Lucaria, so that means these dudes were probably astrologers, you know, like looking at the tiny minutia for all that and whatnot. Gamers when the open world game is open. I mean, you say that, but a lot of open world games aren't exactly very open, believe it or not.
what kind of music? At the end of the shoreline, hidden inside another great hollow tree, you're met with an ancient, eternal dragon. What the hell is this place? Now, the Northern Asylum and the Painted World are one thing. Little pieces of extra content, self-contained dungeons with some nice loot and EXP, a couple of optional bosses hidden off the well-beaten path. But the Ash Lake is something different. It's vast, near limitless, empty. There are Erdtrees. It has music. There's a goddamn dragon in here. A being that's supposed to very much not exist. The dragons lived in the Age of Grey, the cosmogonical stillness before the Age of Fire, before disparity, the Lords, the First Flame, and the Dark Soul of Man. The Ash Lake changes things. It rewrites and challenges the cosmology we are provided with at the beginning of the game. And here it waits, hidden behind a couple of secret walls, never to be seen by the majority of the casual player base. Perhaps the reason... In Bloodborne, there's an elevator in Odin Chapel, which takes you up into the Healing Church workshop. If you fight your way up, you'll find a locked door on top of the tower. Behind the door lays Upper Cathedral Ward, the base of operation for the choir, an elite faction of the Healing Church whom are responsible for the outbreak of the beastly scourge. The choir sought to uncover the mysteries of the universe through communion with the Great Ones, but their second purpose was to accelerate the evolution of mankind into a higher state of being. The sky and the cosmos are one, howled their adage, and to some, no means were deemed too extreme or immoral in pursuit of this goal. Fighting through beast and kin, we reach the Altar of Despair, and in front of it we find Ebrietas, the daughter of Cosmos, the left-behind Great One. She is one of the most important characters of the story, yet here Ebrietas waits for us, hidden behind locked doors and optional areas, tucked behind elevators and missing keys. Here,
I'm just going to say that was like a fantastic little summary of coming up to Upper Cathedral Ward and just like the ethos behind the Healing Church and the choir specifically. And really makes me kind of want to replay Bloodborne a little bit.
here she rests dormant and laments in front of an altar, hidden within the highest peak of Yharnam, ever doomed to watch from afar the sky and the cosmos, reminiscing of her kin that ascended untold eons ago. Here, only she remains. FromSoft hid her here because if you go around the tower, you're met with a chasm and a bunch of broken walkways. At the bottom of this crumbled tower lays a secret entrance to the Cathedral Ward. But if you don't chart your course to the bottom, but land instead on this unassuming beam here...
Got him. I feel that one.
But if you don't chart your course to the bottom, but land instead on this unassuming beam here...
See, that was the good way to do it. You gotta aim for the ropes. Like, a lot of people like to use the little, like, plank over here, but I've seen so many people fall trying to use that method. But if you aim your head at the ropes, they, like, go straight down onto the platform.
But if you don't chart your course to the bottom, but land instead on this unassuming beam here, you can drop off onto this tiny platform and exit the tower through the hidden door. Behind the door, you'll find a pathway to the abandoned Hunter's Workshop, the one Hunter's dream, the game's hub world, is built upon. Bloodborne's world is weird, filled with layers of different realities, nightmares and dreams which entwine and bleed into each other. The reasons why this place matters for the story of Bloodborne are too lengthy and complicated for the scope of this video, but in short, this place is a big deal. And it also houses a piece of 1/3 of an umbilical cord, a rare item needed to reach the ultimate ending of the game, and here it just lays, on the table, inside this forsaken old workshop, buried by time and dust, hidden within a wall and a secret door, as if to... In the Forgotten Woods, there's a cavern hidden deep within the mountain. Through the cavern, across the poisonous swamp, you can find a pair of ladders. A pair of ladders so long, they'd make even Hideo Kojima proud. These ladders, deep within the mountain, lead you...
I mean, you gotta wait for Central Yharnam to load in.
back to where you started your nightmarish journey, the front yard of Josefka's clinic. From the back alley, you can climb inside the clinic and witness yourself what the choir has been up to here. If you come here after the blood moon has risen, you can receive another 1/3 of an umbilical cord, the rare substance to call communion with the Great One. It's impossible to reach the
Alright, it looks like we're back. I'm going to wait a couple more seconds. My OBS disconnected randomly. So I backed up the video a little bit, and then we should be good now.
to reach the final ending of the game, if you don't visit at least the clinic or the abandoned workshop. You need 3 umbilical cords to beckon the final boss of the game, the unnamed moon presence. For one reason or another, FromSoft decided to hide these moments, resolutions and revelations within these small buildings, behind pathless ways and roads less traveled, so the player might experience. Of course, From Software isn't the only developer around with easy-to-miss yet essential moments in their games.
The Insaludian Miracle? Oh, better start working soon, yeah. And then Jack said that Arcane Workshop has a really good Outer Wilds video about the game music.
Miracle,
okay.
An Insaludian phasmid, an enormous reed-like insect. The phasmid has been a red herring sort of joke throughout the game, a silly side quest where you run around Martinez and check baits left around by the cryptozoologist couple you met in the bar. It's quite clear from the start the thing doesn't actually exist. The search of the phasmid was just a shared dream of an old married couple. But lo and behold, here it is, alive and very much real for all to see. Now, most of Disco Elysium's most interesting content is optional and quite easy to miss. The constant dice rolls, allocated stats and the way DE's dialogue system works make it nigh on impossible for 2 playthroughs to be identical, even if you engage with the same quests and content. Disco Elysium is absolute, all-encompassing madness by its nature, and could fill the entirety of this video. But the encounter with the phasmid isn't optional. If you get this far, you will see it. And thank God for that, since it's one of the most beautiful and heartfelt scenes I've ever seen. Solving the main murder plot acts as a thematic close for the city of Revachol, its history, and the shard-like socio-political legacy we've dragged ourselves through the whole game. It isn't a triumphant affair, but a tired, sad scene which underlines our incapacity to move on and learn from our mistakes. But the phasmid is something else. It brings to a close our character's arc, and it ends in an invitation to some good old honest-to-God redemption. Right here, right now, for this brief while, Harry is whole. Against all odds, he has solved the case and made it up this far. And despite all the horrors of life, even if just for a moment, the world is filled with luminous beauty that can redeem everything and everyone, even someone as horribly flawed as him. This is the moment where Harry can finally grant himself some forgiveness and move on in his life with newfound resolve. This heartfelt scene is also, by design, missable. You need to roll 2 skill checks to interact with the Insaludian phasmid. Inland Empire is your ability to sense or imagine hidden secrets of the cosmos. Fail the check and you won't be able to communicate with the creature. You'll just stare at each other in the beautiful sunset, accompanied by some incredible music. Fail the electrochemistry check and the creature will just run away when you approach it. It vanishes into the reeds and takes with it all the redemptive words, all its world-healing wisdom. It's baffling to think many people will go through this game and miss this redemptive scene, thanks to some bad luck and unwitting stat allocations. This heartfelt moment that ties it all together. I don't know, maybe there is some allegory hidden here about the hidden nature.
A very interesting cut right there. Now, Angie says, you want to play Disco Elysium again? This guy is a great writer? Yeah, he's doing a pretty good job, huh? Oh boy.
One of my favorite scenes of ever is found in Konami's Suikoden 2 for the original PlayStation. But in order for you to appreciate the scene, we need to set up some backstory. So buckle up and gather round, for I'm about to spoil Suikoden 2 for you.
Oh man, this is a pretty big game. I intend to cover it at some point, so if you guys want to dip out for like the next 10 minutes or so, I would totally understand. The Bright Shield and the Black Sword.
The story begins in the campsite of the Unicorn Youth Brigade, a mix of military regime and Boy Scouts. A place where the fine, able youth of Highland can learn the ropes of warfare. The camp is attacked in the darkness of the night. During your daring escape, you and your BFF Joey find out the attack is a false flag operation.
Oh, damn, he said his name properly. That's kind of surprising. Because his name is Jowy. When I was a kid first playing it, I thought it was like Jowie. But I noticed like on the back of the cover, it was spelled Joei, like Joe E. And so like that's kind of how I figured it out like a little bit later. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of funny that like the official artwork on the cover doesn't match like the official localization in the game. Hey, Neon Ava, welcome back. Neon Binary Ava, welcome back to the stream. You never played Suikoden before? This video will be interesting. Yeah, so the coolest thing about Suikoden 2 is that it's a direct sequel from Suikoden 1. So the events of that game kind of like tie into this game, but they take part in two different locations of the world, and there is a little bit of overlap between some of the characters of the first game and this one, and it's one of my favorite games of all time.
Carried out by Highland's own White Wolf Brigade, an elite military group led by the Prince of Highland himself. The White Wolves, with Prince Luca Blight at the helm, slaughter the whole Unicorn Brigade in order to incite war against the neighboring city-states of Jouston. Your escape is detected and a chase ensues up an old mountain path. The windy road leads next to a cliffside. Before a daring jump down to the waters below, you make an oath to each other and carve it into the silent stone wall of the mountain.
Oh yeah, now I know where he's going with this. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense in terms of like missing things. Oof, yeah.
Should we ever get separated, this is where we'll return, find each other again. You jump, survive, and manage to escape. You're declared as traitors to the Empire, filthy spies who led a city-state ambush against the Youth Brigade. Your family and community disowns you, and you're forced into exile. With nothing left, starts your long and tragic journey into the heart of the rebellion as a great champion against the tyranny of Highland. About 1/3 into the story, you and Joey happen upon an old cave where you are granted with the two halves of the true rune of beginning, the bright shield and the black sword. It's this whole magical law, destiny, fate thing. Just go with it, you know. From this moment on, both of your fates are entwined with these runes. Joey is captured during a siege, yet manages to escape through the use of off-screen shenanigans. The joyful reunion is cut short by an abrupt tragedy. Joey stabs to death a prominent city-state leader and flees the murder scene. He escapes the city, and the rest of your crew is left dismayed and confused. Joey isn't simply a traitor who changed his allegiance and crawled back to the Empire that cast him aside. Joey switches side because he loves Highland. He wishes to end the corruption, to end the war, to overthrow the Mad Prince who's sowing death and strife everywhere around him. The Empire of Highland must return to its picturesque state, like it was in the good old days. Perhaps that state has ever existed in the mind of a naive child. But his plan works. Throughout the story, Joey rises through the ranks of the Highland military. He becomes a captain, a general, a fierce tactician and trusted leader of the public. By the penultimate climax of the story, Joey has made himself the king consort of Highland. Now he can reforge the Empire into something better than the war-torn husk it is now. But the chasm between the two nations has grown too deep, and when an opportunity presents itself, their city-state alliance launches a full-scale campaign against Lenoir, the capital of Highland. The city is sacked. One by one, the heroes of Empire fall before you, all willing to die for their new just king, Joey Blight. But when you reach the throne room, you're not met with Joey. The king has fled the city. You do battle against a giant magical wolf thingy, because it's a JRPG.
Yep.
Of course you do. After the beast is felled, the city is yours. The kingdom of Highland lays in ruins, and the short-lived monarchy of King Joey Blight is brought to an end. Now all that remains is to declare the independence of the newfound Dunan Republic. The story ends as you accept your duties as a guardian of this new nation and vow to guide it towards a bright future with all your best intentions and abilities.
I just noticed he also named his character Rio. Yeah, Arcane Workshop is definitely Suikoden fanatic to get like the canon names into the game as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he like named the protagonist of Suikoden 1 like McDole or or Tier, I guess would be another way of doing it. But like the funny thing is, if you played Suikoden 1 and import your save data into Suikoden 2, the protagonist's name will kind of get overwritten by however many caps, like uppercase characters you used. So if you name your character Tier, Tir, like the canonical name, in Suikoden 2, his last name will be Tickdol instead of like Mickdol. So just kind of some funny little Easter eggs.
A bright future with all your best intentions and abilities. Roll credits. Or not. You may turn down this invitation to rule and power, walk away from the meeting, abandon your post and responsibilities, disheartened by all the tragedy and loss this war has brought you. You may wander in the lands alone, unaccompanied by your party of 5 chosen warriors, the entourage you've grown accustomed during this long journey. Throughout the game, the Kingdom of Highland, a significant part of the map, has been inaccessible to you. Now, at the end of everything, as the Empire has been ground to dust underneath your campaign, you're free to wander and explore this fallen kingdom alone. If you visit the area where the Unicorn Brigade massacre took place, you can make your way up to the cliffside from where you took your leap of faith. From there, you can find the mark you carved on the mountainside. And there, by the cliffside, Joey is waiting for you. One last duel, the champion of the Dunan Republic against the King of Highland, the Bright Shield against the Black Sword. The bearers of the runes of beginning are destined to face each other till one or the other falls. No one can escape fate. This scene can play out in multiple ways based on your choices, but here's my favorite one.
I knew it.
Joey attacks you, but you refuse to fight him. Time after time he hits you, you evade. He strikes, you block. The sun sets behind you. Joey begs you to fight, to put an end to the Blight bloodline and make this the last war to ever plague this land. But you can't do it. No matter how honorable his intentions are, you can't raise your arms against Joey. He attacks you again and again until he's too weak to carry on anymore. He collapses to your arms, and only then you realize the toll the Black Sword rune has taken on his body. Joey used its power again and again throughout the war, and now it has all but devoured him. And then, after a few tender words, Joey dies in your arms, and this story comes to a close. Perhaps the developers at Konami wanted to make this scene optional, as which brings us back
Yeah, that's so hard to like talk about. I kind of wish he didn't cut away so he gave more of his thoughts, although he might like go into that more later on. I'm a little bit bummed that like I ended up spoiling the game for you guys this way if you've never played it, because it truly is like one of the best stories in any video game that I've played, to be honest. So anyway, definitely want to give like a big thumbs up to Arcane Workshop for summarizing it so sweetly right there.
full circle into the beginning of this video, to Elden Ring. Because inside that easy-to-miss area, behind a couple of hidden pathways and an invisible door, lays a hidden moment worthy to stand shoulder to shoulder with the other greats.
All right, so the Flaming Madness. So yeah, the last thing that I wanted to mention with like the Suikoden thing, although like Arcane Workshop talked about it a bit, the whole aspect of being able to screw up that final quest line between the main characters of Suikoden 2 is also kind of hinted at a couple times throughout the game. So you do need to be paying attention, and it'll kind of hint towards it. So when he'd mentioned that the main character got the bright shield rune and the other guy got like the black sword rune, it's thematically relevant that in their final duel, the guy with the black sword rune could only attack, and the proper thing to do with as the owner of the bright shield rune is to defend. So it's an issue of like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. That kind of principle is at play there, except you are like the immovable object.
The nomadic merchants are a common sight around the waypoints of Elden Ring. Helpful people are a rarity in the lands between, and these merchants are one of the few who bear no ill will, no ulterior motives. They merely try to fight off starvation and despair in the ways their tribe has done since time immemorial, selling items, wares, and information to the tarnished and other misfortuned who venture back and forth the lands between. Most of the merchants reside near signs of grace, and thus, little by little, their presence leaves its etch into your memory. Rest is near. The warmth of a safe bonfire is just ahead. Some of them even play music with their weird instruments. A beautiful, mournful melody of their people, a song about sorrows of times long gone. The world of Elden Ring is relentless, so you come to treasure these small reprieves. You, the merchant, the bonfire, the stillness of the night, and this beautiful song. Once, long ago, the merchants traveled as a great caravan from land to land, city to city, until one day they fell under the ire of the Golden Order. Ill words spread in the lands between of the disease and strife the caravan brought with them. Where they went, calamity followed, according to gossip at least. Rumors, lies, none know for sure, told the merchants prayed to a blasphemous madness that sought to defile the golden grace. The Order would not let this type of slander pass. So, inside Leyndell, the hallowed capital of the Golden Order, you might come across an entrance to the sewers. Be prepared for bad times ahead here. From the sewers, you can enter the subterranean shunning grounds, a prison for all those who were not touched by the grace, who did not meet the criteria of the Golden Order. Here, underneath the sewers of the Golden City, they would lead their lives, never to see the light of day. At the bottom of the shunning grounds is the chamber of Mo, the Omen, the sire of the demigods, who was nonetheless banished here to hide his hideous visage from the world. But beyond Mo's chamber, there's an illusory wall, and behind that, another hidden pathway. Inside, a miserable sight awaits. Perhaps the Golden Order listened to the rumors from all around the lands between. They waited until one day the great caravan arrived to Leyndell, which greeted them with open arms and laurel-laden roads. And when the last of the carriages had crossed the great walls of the city, they barred the gates and got to work. Here, underneath the roads, sewers, and the shunning grounds, is where the caravan was cast, sealed into darkness for their alleged blasphemy. Amidst the endless pile of corpses, only one nomad remains, crippled by time and despair. He sits in silence and plays a mournful song, the ancient song of his people. At the bottom of this giant crypt, stories and stories down, is a sealed door. Only few in this world know how to open. And behind these doors lays in wait the three fingers, the advocates of the frenzied flame, the profane fire that seeks to burn this tired, corrupt world to the ground. Maybe a new, a better one could rise from the ashes. Perhaps the nomads, met with such undeserved spite and cruelty, gathered all their hatred into a prayer, into a song. In their tomb they howled, cursed and screamed, days, weeks, years. One by one, the voices died out, but someone heard their cries. The flaming madness answered their call and made this tomb its home. With the great
Right, and one thing that I do wonder about that is whether or not the three fingers were actually produced from the merchants, or whether or not it had been already sealed in there beforehand. Because in many ways, it seems more likely that the three fingers would have been down there to begin with, at least before like the nomads were there. But there is like the one description that talks about how the madness was born from the merchants or something like that. I would need to look at it verbatim to remember exactly what it says. You think it was possibly sealed? Maybe. Yeah, I think that's most likely, but you know, whenever there's any wiggle room for doubt, it just bothers me. You also think Shabiri framed the nomads? Yeah, that's another popular theory as well. Who knows? Indeed.
great caravan now destroyed, the remaining nomads lead a life of solitude. They learned their lesson of what could happen should they band together. Yet each one of them remembers and carries on the legacy of the great caravan, a yellow, burning hue in their eyes, the mark of the all-cleansing madness of the frenzied flame.
Yeah, and as Andrew says, it feels to him like the merchants basically said, "We will just be what you accuse us of," kind of their only avenue for revenge. That's kind of how I look at them as well. I do also wonder whether or not there is a oneness that is inherent to the nomadic merchant people that sets them apart from other beings in the lands between, or whether or not their proximity to the frenzied flame kind of blurred their boundaries, so to speak. But I mean, a lot of that has also been cut, so you just kind of have to languish like they do deep down in the underground.
It's almost effortless to walk past this little story, past all these stories. Fix your gaze into the highest, furthest point in the horizon and just march on. And why not? We're busy people with busy lives, shit to do and responsibilities to handle. There's quests to complete, chores to finish and checklists to cross. And this goddamn journey is long enough as is, without piling on any extra detours. I get it. You're busy. I'm busy. Everyone's busy. Death comes to us all and in the end the gaping grave awaits. Might as well get busy before that. Now I don't know the explicit reasons why these stories were made optional, why the devs felt the need to obscure that particular pathway. And I've made an effort to steer away from that question this whole video. Not because I don't know the answer, but because I don't think it really matters. It's a grand part of what makes these stories special, and I'm happy to leave it at that. If finitude is what gives life its meaning, maybe the same thing applies to stories, to art, relationships, to any experience you place value on. You could have just as easily walked past that one gallery, grabbed a different book from the endless row of books, not take that one job and end up not meeting your future wife, grabbed the controller and played something different, bared witness to a different story. It could have been so effortless to walk past all those moments, to just march on with your eyes fixed on the next map marker, and after that, another map marker waits. So many goddamn map markers. Now, I don't want to get too sappy on you this close to the finish line. We made it almost to the end of the video without turning this onto some think piece about the fleeting nature of life or something similar. Sometimes, you just want to talk about video games. But still, there's something here, something pivotal. Perhaps it's something as simple as this. It bears me well to be reminded from time to time that the most interesting stories, the most heartfelt moments and the revelations of utmost importance are seldom found along the already beaten path. Thanks for watching.
A video by Arcane Workshop, Benjamin Fogger Pintilla. All right, so video for real is about to make you tear up. Really incredible stuff. Yeah, that video was something that I do not say very often on stream, or pretty much just in general, to be honest. I think that was a phenomenally well done video on so many counts. Having the what's it called, like the transition to jump around so much at first was a little bit jarring, obviously, but I think it kind of worked towards a like broader point towards the end of the video, because at first I was like, I don't understand like the stylistic choice of why he chose to have so many abrupt transitions, but I'm kind of more on board with it as the video continued. So yeah, that was definitely one of the best videos we've watched on stream, I think. The difficulty of difficulty. All right, I think I'm gonna definitely sub and look at some more of their videos sometime. So yeah, that was really unexpected. I'm pleasantly surprised. Also very jealous of his voice and his delivery. So I was just thinking to myself, I mean, I've thought this for a long time. Like, I think I have the potential to be funny or like more poignant and stuff. But honestly, my delivery just sucks. So there's like a lot of things that I think I can say or do that could be funny or entertaining to other people if they're coming from somebody other than myself. And that sounds like a little bit like too like over dramatic and whatnot. But it's just like, I don't know, the way that I speak just doesn't work as well. So I was thinking of like if I were trying to deliver some of his lines that he was saying throughout the video, I think they would have just fallen flat for whatever reason. But anyway, very, very good video there. So going back to that whole sappy bit towards the end about why some of these best moments are hidden, I wonder, and I don't want to like speak for Arcane Workshop because they left it very open-ended for a reason there, is that we're kind of all left to make our own choices. Some of these choices are more guided and some are unguided and can be tragic. So like there's a whole idea of missed connections where you see somebody and want to talk to them, but it's not the right time or place to do it, so you don't. But you don't really get another chance to do it, so you kind of regret not being able to go through with, whatever you wanted to say to that person at a specific time. And that's just kind of life, And so I think games in many ways reflect life because they're, a form of literature. And so literature reflects life. And so obviously games are a bit more interactive in a way than most literature is not. And they can build connections with their players in most ways a lot of literature cannot. Which isn't to say like one is better than the other. But yeah, it's just very interesting to think how many quests or like true endings get missed because they're technically optional. Calix Natura, welcome in. You're so glad we watched this together. You started watching it months ago but didn't get it and never finished watching it. Well, thank you for joining. Get one of those lapel mics that'll capture more of my voice's bass. It's not necessarily the bass. It's literally like how I deliver my lines. Mr. Yada has a similar problem. My condolences, man. Also an odd trick for vocal projection. Speak up more than forward. Yeah. It also doesn't help, like, right now as I'm talking, like, my nostrils are all, like, clogged and sinusy, so... But, I mean, I'm not, like, worried about it too much. Like, a lot of other people like my voice, but I just feel like if I had a different style of delivery, I could do more diverse things, but it's all good. Elden Ring lore got you thinking about your exes listening to In Rainbows? That is a lot to unpack right there. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Especially with In Rainbows as the soundtrack, thinking about exes. Yeah, I feel like I need to leave that alone. Usually the only person who dislikes your voice is yourself. It's all in your head, literally. No, I've received plenty of comments on my videos about like my cadence at times. So I've become like a little bit more self-conscious about that for some of my videos, which isn't like the worst thing because I take some of the feedback as like being constructive because some of it was, and I was maybe a little bit too sing-songy in terms of the way that I would read certain lines, but I do try to work on that like more each video, and I try to get better about delivering my lines. So yeah, it's whatever. It's just like one of the woes of making a public platform. But like I said, I think it's just like more room for growth essentially. It's unique, which for YouTube videos being memorable is a good thing. Me or him, because he has a brilliant voice. I am a little bit jealous there. It's hard to convey jokes through text. Yeah. In some ways, I think some of my jokes come across better through text. All right. So that was a great video. Now we'll move on to something completely different with what is the Crucible in Elden Ring in all caps by Quelaag.
I'm feeling ambitious, I'm feeling articulate, and I'm ready to go. Because we're going to be talking about...
Rip. She might be like playing that up, but...
Wait, what are we talking about?
It does feel like that about the Crucible.
Oh my god, we're talking about the Crucible. Oh my god, okay. Oh my god. Okay, yeah, we're talking about the Crucible today. But first I need to talk to you about Miyazaki's entire anthology of games. For me to make sense. I am going to put a timestamp in this, so y'all who are just curious on my take on what the Crucible is, you can just jump to that. But for those of you that want to take this journey with me and really truly understanding how I came to the conclusion I did, hop in, buckle up.
There's literally no timestamps for the video.
I'm also going to talk about all mythology, and it's going to be fun, so stick around. With that being said, I want to make a disclaimer, and I hope my editor puts in something here so I don't look like I'm just doing like a dumb gesture. This is the disclaimer alert. I am here to tell you that
that's what happens when you give the editors free reign.
Even though that there are overlapping symbols and themes and objects, characters, whatever, I don't think that Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Elden Ring are all part of this like intersecting multiverse. I just don't. I feel like there are a lot of overlapping themes and philosophical connections. I feel like this is Miyazaki iterating on this world that he's building and exploring the cycle of life and death and conflict over and over and over again. I feel like also it's really beautiful to see the first kind of like iterations of his work.
The dog in the background.
And how much more sophisticated they get, how much more fleshed out they get, and also like the art team and the environmental designers like knock it out of the park by Dark Souls 3. The vistas and the way that like the camera kind of like zooms the background into the foreground, so we get this like really beautiful overlay of like everything. It really allows us to see the details of the world in a way that wasn't possible with Dark Souls 1, because
yeah, it's also interesting to me like when the camera perspective changes, like when you go out in the high wall of Lothric, after you fight Vorge and like look down into like the next area, you can see the camera like zoom out ever so slightly, so that way you can see like more of the vista. So it's kind of interesting to me like when the devs do that. And boss rooms are pretty much like the only other time that really happens, that FOV expands. Beans and Rice says, some folks really struggle with reading things back, like they sound sarcastic or bored. I don't really have problems like that. I mean, I kind of do, but I just do multiple takes. It's a real pain in the ass. So like, I always thought when I was a kid that it would be pretty easy to be an actor. You just get your lines and you say them like you think they need to be said. But after doing a lot more voice work for my channel, I just realized how shit I am at actually trying to, what's the word? It's not like articulate or enunciate, just deliver the lines in a way which matches my internal voice. Yeah, I guess I'll say it like this way. The guy who speaks in my head is way more eloquent than this absolute goober who controls my mouth. Yeah, the inflections are just atrocious. You noticed that in the first Hunter's Nightmare? Oh, you noticed that first in the Hunter's Nightmare right before Ludwig by the Giants? Alright, going back to the video. I think she said something else. Oh no, it was just like the dog snoring in the background. Yeah, I've definitely had to redo takes of something that like I got the perfect take of, but the dog, one of them, made just an atrocious noise in the background that was just unsalvageable. And so, rip the reels.
I sure as hell didn't fucking know that the Kiln of the First Flame was sitting on top of a fucking tree. Y'all. I didn't know that until I saw Illusionary Walls video like a long time ago. But I didn't know that. How was I supposed to know that? Until Dark Souls 3. But that being said.
Yeah, I do really wish that if I wish there were like more free cam mods for their games, or rather than mods like modes that were like actually integrated by the developer. So it would be amazing if the DLC gave players a little bit of that because I know they added in a camera mode for like Armored Core 6, but I'm skeptical, just kind of crossing my fingers. Stella says, is how you physically hear your voice really different than how it actually sounds? That's your problem with communicating? So, I mean, it's not so much like how my voice sounds as much as having as much control over my voice to match the way that I will inflect some words in my head, because it's really weird to try to describe. Maybe, man, I don't like when I like pull up my raw audio footage. I guess it's not footage, but some of my raw audio, just to show you like some different takes. Let's do something random, but something a little bit more recent. I'm opening up gold and silver. Let's see if I have. Okay, so I've got let's see, at least 3 takes of gold 80, and I don't remember what I said. Gold 79 we do. Oh, so maybe 79, whatever. Although it's unfinished and can only be used in the heart of the storm beyond time in Fair Missoula, I think the reason. So right here, I think I'm speaking too quickly. Not necessarily for myself personally, but I know like a lot of lore enjoyers are an international bunch whose primary language is not English. So for my video essays, I try to slow down my cadence quite a bit. Like right now, I'm being like very cognizant of it, and I'm slowing down. But yeah, okay. The reason Miquella's needle allows us to stave off the frenzied flame is because we inherit the will of Millennia and gain the power to resist the influence of the outer gods. It may not even be Millennia's will specifically, just a needle that's been infused with an incredible amount of willpower. I'm also like a little bit flat here, not as inflecting as I want to be. I don't have the words to articulate what I mean. Either way, if the unalloyed gold is supposed to be pure, would this mean that the truest essence of gold comes from the will? Maybe. There's probably something more to it we can't fully pin down, but it would be poetic if the truest essence of gold come from the will. And then I was like, screw it. I come from the will, so I just stopped. But like towards the end, it wasn't too bad. I wouldn't have been like too upset with that. There's probably something more to it we can't fully pin down. And so even there, I have like a bit more inflection in the voice. It like adds a little bit more interest. It's slower, it's a little bit clearer and easier to understand. But it would be poetic if the truest essence of gold came from the will, when the greater will is supposedly the arbiter of all things gold. With Miquella's needle being unfinished, it's also possible to conclude that gold merely has the power to contain the will, and that unalloyed gold isn't synonymous with willpower. As is tradition in a FromSoft game, everything comes down to individual interpretation. And so what I'll often do is if I have like multiple takes, I will splice out the parts that like don't work and just use part of the other take to like make Frankenstein's monster, essentially, to get something that I can tolerate. I might not be entirely happy with everything, but yeah. And as Chadwick says, welcome to the stream, by the way. My tone and delivery are closer to lecture hall or conversational versus storytelling. Vadi and Arcane are delivering butter very much on purpose. That's very true, and I could ham it up quite a bit, but that just feels kind of like antithetical to my personality in a lot of ways, and I couldn't like really stand doing it for that extended amount of time. Like I could certainly ham it up. I definitely won't do it tonight, especially like with my cold and my sinuses and my throat kind of scratching. So anyway, I appreciate all you guys trying to like what's the word? Not reinforce, not reinsure. Reassure, trying to like reassure me that my voice is okay. I'm not like really that bent out of shape about it. It's just like, oh, if only, you know, like you had like one physical part of yourself that was like different. It's just kind of like that. I just wish I was more articulate in some ways, at least as far as like voice recording goes. Like I don't really mind how I speak, obviously, when I'm speaking off the cuff like this. I do wish I was a bit more articulate in general, because I often feel as though I need to pause to find the right word. That might unironically be a form of OCD. I don't have like a diagnosis or anything, but when I can't find the right word, my like brain just kind of locks up and I kind of just like get stuck until I figure out what I'm trying to say, which is just kind of awful. And in many ways, I prefer like text over voice for that reason. Thanks for the reassurance. It's the script and not my delivery? Maybe. Stella says, now that you said the international audience thing, you finally get why so many YouTubers talk so slowly. You have to listen to almost everything on at least 1.25 speed because of it. Yeah, I watch most things on 2 times speed, which is why often when I start a stream, if I'm not muted, then the videos are at like twice speed. Alright, so that's enough off topic about my stupid ass voice. So let's go ahead back into Quelaag's exasperation with Miyazaki-isms and the Crucible. I mean, I'm going to back it up a couple seconds too.
I know that illusionary walls video like a long time ago, but I didn't know that. How was I supposed to know that until Dark Souls 3? But that being said, I want to mention that, yeah, I don't think any of these are connected, like, whatsoever. Don't think that there's the interconnecting multiverse, because if there was, that would mean Patches is flying a mech and is a spider, and I can't emphasize that enough. I can't emphasize that enough. So let's go. Let's get into it.
Also, where's this music from? It's super nostalgic. Like, it's on like the tip of the tongue, but I just can't think of it.
We're gonna start off with my favorite game, and it's Demon Souls, which is a hot take because a lot of people's is Dark Souls. But Demon Souls has a special place in my heart. It was a PlayStation exclusive, so not a lot of people have played it. Similar to Bloodborne, however, it did get a remake, but only for PlayStation 5. So it's just really not super accessible. I understand the story hasn't reached too many people. SparkNotes version, a old king decides to sell his soul to a demon to rid the world of mankind's corruption. And Miyazaki at this point, this is fairly early on in this Western fantasy myth adventure, and he was kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what stuck, and what stuck was this big beautiful meatball. And
I remember somebody like linked this in the Discord because they're like, this is like the best, most accurate description of like the lore I've heard, because like the spaghetti thing, I think. So I think I like saw like 30 seconds of this video, or maybe I've watched it before and just forgot.
And that meatball was the old one. He's kind of like our first little outer god, but like a demon, like an ancient demon, maybe like a lesser key of Solomon, like definitely like a Paimon. You know, we love a Paimon. He was like supposed to be this big celestial cosmic tree that housed this soul of this like primordial demon. Like I mentioned before, King Allant sold his soul to this big old meatball because he was wanting to rid mankind of corruption. Whatever, dude. It was just an excuse because you literally didn't want to take responsibility for your bad political policies that fucked over your rule. That's not my problem, but I'm here anyway, so whatever. But as an adventurer who's fixing everything for this guy, you are accompanied by your own little candle maiden. And her name is the Maiden in Black. And she has this really beautiful scene at the end of the game. In the back of the old one's body, we actually have to enter it. We go in through its little mouth. But in the back of the old one's body is this little cradle that houses this white fire that is the soul of the old one. And she goes in the back with you and she like lulls the old one back to slumber. And there's like different endings you can get. You can either kill the Maiden in Black and take the old one's soul for yourself and get like an abundance of souls, or you can just let her kind of lull it back to sleep, and then you get to enter New Game Plus, and woohoo! But it introduces...
Mr. Yada says, "Ah, yes, the beautiful scene at the end where we step on her head." Wait, yeah, I know, right? Vacuous asked, "Who would I worship? The Scarlet Rot, the Greater Will, the Formless Mother, Death, the Primeval Current, or the Frenzied Flame?" Not a lot of good options, to be real there. So perhaps the Greater Will? Yeah, it's a pretty rough list. Also,
like
the Coop Snore counter is absolutely slaying me here.
That is this primordial aspect of the world. It introduces souls being depicted as little fireballs, as fire. There's actually different colored fire for like different kinds of souls too. And it introduces, I forget the word, it's like transmogrification. I hope I'm saying that right, fuck. Of demon souls being able to be turned into spells or metal or like miracles or whatever. So we have this transition of a spirit or a soul being put into something, and when we read about it, we get to see the story or like the memory or the experiences. When we also use the demon souls items, we get experience points as well. So we have this like image of fire being our experiences and being our influence and our power. And then we have this other aspect that is called our character tendency, and that is kind of changed or influenced by our behavior as a player. So there are these two different aspects to ourself. I feel like by Dark Souls 1, tendency was replaced with the humanity function, and it's not necessarily like a granular like karma function, like you are more good or you are more evil or you are neutral. Like I don't think it wasn't like that. It's more just like how much humanity you have influences the fire of chaos, and I'll get it.
Oh, that was an awkward pausing point. Yeah, I was almost going to say that Dark Souls 2 in some ways is a bit more reminiscent of Demon Souls in that regard, because there's more consequences of being hollowed beyond being open for invasions, and like obviously like you aren't hollowed when you get invaded. Wait, although maybe DS2 is a little bit weird that way. But anyway, like at least with quests like with Navlon, if you only talk to him while you're human, like you wouldn't get the badass spell, which I screwed up because oh no, Dark Souls 2 actually punishes you for being good too. It's not just like punishing only the noobs. So anyway, enough salts. Without Horns, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again.
Into that when I get into the Dark Souls section, but there are some things that he iterated and that he changed, right? But we still have the souls being depicted as fire. We still have the souls being nurtured and like put inside of like this big tree. Like there's this big source of souls, and when it's inside of the tree or the old one, it influences the fabric of reality. And he actually causes reality to become so fucked up and wild. The spread of demons became unstoppable, that there are these characters called the Monumentals, and they try to break the fabric of reality apart in order to quarantine off the spread of this influence. However, this quarantine doesn't work, and it still spreads no matter what. So we have just a lot of these little pieces that Miyazaki's kind of like sprinkling into his game, and we start to see them come over when he makes Dark Souls. Sure enough, we see our good old tree again, but this time it's stationary. It's not like a sentient outer god or being. We have our kiln of the first flame, which houses the flame of lords. So it's very similar to how King Alant's flame, or like King Alant was inside of the old one, like flailing around, but it's really similar to how the old one's flame was kind of like sitting in the back of this tree, and it was really like shaping the world. It's that same kind of visual imagery that's popping up. The difference is that it's now housed inside of a kiln, but something that's really interesting about the kiln that is very difficult to make out when you play through the game because of the technological limitations is that this kiln is actually sitting on top of a tree. There are roots here that go like this. And there is like a big brazier. I keep thinking I'm saying like bra or something. You know what I mean? Like a big, you know, like in Mulan when the guy like...
Yeah, I'm kind of curious just like where the mythos of the evil tree came from and like how prominent it is, because I always think of like Exdeath from Final Fantasy V as like the evil tree. I know Patrick Rothfuss also incorporated an evil tree in like his Name of the Wind series, which I mean, the DLC's coming around the corner, guys. Trust me, right? So, anyway, those are like the two like big examples that I can think of evil trees off the top of my head. So, the old one might be one of those as well. So I'm just kind of, maybe I'll need to look into that more on my own sometime. Kind of feels like Miyazaki's been trying to refine the same central concept for the last 15 years sometimes. No, I definitely get that vibe as well. Yeah.
Puts the torch and he's like, now all of China knows you're here. That's like, that is what this looks like. It's like a big dome bowl situation that the kiln sits inside of. And then the flame is like, wee, it's like right here. And then we find also too that there is a dome-shaped kiln. This is called a beehive kiln down in Izalith. Where are you? Beehive kiln looks like this. This is what a beehive kiln looks like. And we find out that Izalith, like through the series of the game, so hold on, let me backtrack. There is a lord named Gwyn, and he has a fire, and his age of fire is slowly burning out, and he wants to keep it going. And he finds out that humanity is pretty fucking flammable. He's a god though, so he doesn't have it, but we do, and we're humans. And sure enough, it turns out that through a curse and
Scowlies asks, what's this video about? It's about the Crucible. Didn't you realize? But as far as what she said there, I do think that Gwyn must have been flammable to some degree because he does link the flame. And obviously when we meet him at the end of DS1, he's not like doubly flammable because he's been turned into ash. And I do mean like he's been turned into ash. That is canonically what he's called. All right, Jack, is a mimic. Thanks for dropping by. Yeah, make sure you post it like on the video itself, so that way I'll remember to go back for it. Quelaag's videos are like the Gideon Ofnir or Pepe Ofnir Sylvia image in video form. Okay. Oh, you were making food and only half listening. So Gwyn is the first Ashen one. Yes, but no. Like when you say Ashen one, that could imply like the protagonist type thing. But he is like the first dude that is Ash apparently. So yeah, but he wasn't like Ash when he linked the flame, whereas in DS3 you can be Ash and try to link the flame, which is why it's so pitiful.
some other shit that Gwyn was kind of manipulating the undead, and Allfather Lloyd was absolutely hunting the undead for their humanity and for bone shards. They act as kindling and they prolong the Age of Fire. However, it was inevitable that it was going to end, and sure enough, Gwyn is confronted with that, and that's kind of like the central conflict of the story. But we also have this character, Izalith, who decides that down in this little kiln that she's got going on down in the Undercity, that she wants to recreate or create a flame. Some people say that she wanted to specifically create her own flame of chaos. Some people believe that she was trying to recreate Gwyn's flame. Either way, she was trying to create a flame, and it went wild. It went so wild that it actually caused a big fucking fracture in her kiln, and we actually enter through the crack. Also, thank you both Crestfallen and Illusionary Wall for Crestfallen. This is like from his camera video, like exploring the kiln of the first flame, he was the one that kind of shows off like the root system of like the kiln. And then this is from Illusionary Walls video where the dissecting Dark Souls episode 9, I think. So there's definitely some evidence that this flame kind of wasn't anticipated, because I feel like there would have been precautions, like the fact that that fracture's there, the fact that Gwyn's boys are like going down to intercept the demons, the fact that Quelaag's sister is like suffering, and there seems to be some kind of like tragedy or like tragic emotional reaction to what's happening. It really does feel like this perhaps maybe wasn't intended, but that is totally interpretive. I'm just pulling shit out of my ass right now and rambling. You don't have to feel that way. You could absolutely feel that she was intentionally making the Flame of Chaos. Something really cool about her design too that shows that it could be intentional is that she has these little like bug, I mean you could say they're like praying mantis situations. She almost got like scythes, like she's going to reap the roots of the tree. Like she's fucking coming for the world tree right now. So like I mentioned, humanity.
Also, one of the interesting things to me about the whole Chaos Flame is that it's said to have been born of her ambition specifically, and that's kind of problematic in some ways because those dark feelings like ambition are related to the dark. I didn't mean to be redundant there. I was using dark in a different context originally. And then, anyway. So, if, like, Izalith and Gwyn have ambitions and fears, does that mean they have some of the dark? Maybe. It's like one of the parts of the lore that feels a little bit awkward to try to talk about because the gods are also described as fiery beings elsewhere. But I don't necessarily think that the gods were just all fire. There's probably a component of darkness to them at some point, although I'm sure others would disagree with me about that. But anyway, with the Chaos Flame being related to ambition specifically, I wonder if that's why it is different from like the first flame specifically, because the first flame doesn't really seem to like want anything. It just seems to exist. Whereas the Chaos Flame seems to want to consume things, potentially because like it's related to darkness, but it's not clear if it's actually really related to darkness or not. And the description for like the bequeathed Lord Soul that the Witch of Izalith has says that she tried to use her soul to create her another like first flame or something along those lines. So it is unclear whether or not darkness was used in the creation of the Chaos Flame, or if it just kind of like infiltrated its way in because of her boundless ambition, perhaps. Hey Saturn, nice to see you again. Hope you're doing well.
He acts as like kind of like coal or like charcoal, like fuel. In the DLC, he introduces the fact that humanity can grow wild, that if it's not dealt with or controlled, it can become frenzied. And I almost feel like humanity is really similar to like fire just in general and how it's used in Elden Ring, because there's this very like creative force of an age, and I think also that's why we have like a kiln as like a symbol for what houses the fire. Is a kiln is used to like create something. Like if you make something out of clay, you have to fire it in a kiln for it to become hard. Or if you're glazing something, you have to fire it in a kiln for it to become fully glazed and for it to settle. So it's almost like you are putting something in it, and it's like a transformative experience that pulls something that you've created out of it. So it's almost like you put your will into the kiln and it brings out your influence onto the world. Like you are shaping the world, you're making the world reflect your age. It is like this big, creative, beautiful imagery going on here. But sometimes your ambition can be a little bit too much, and it seems like humans are oftentimes victims of that. We have Manus, whose humanity went crazy. The Four Kings have this like really beautiful, it kind of like right where the dark side should be. It almost looks like he's like erupting outwards. almost as like a tree
The dark sign should be on like the back shoulder blade, as far as I know. Errant Vice would know well, wouldn't they?
of some sort. And then we just have all these like symbols of kind of like our, this is the dark side, this is unrelated, ignore this shit, ignore that. But we just
Oh, she's probably using the visual imagery of the Ringed City Knights for that specifically. I can see where she's coming from. Okay.
have a lot of really beautiful I also love to Manus's hand being like the thing that went crazy, because he's like searching for his pendant and he's able to reach through time to grab you and pull you back into the past. It's almost like he was searching through time and space for this pendant. Like, that's how important it was to him. And so I oftentimes see humanity to be synonymous with like, it's like you got your will and whatever, but I almost just feel like it's like emotional tension, like very extreme frenzied emotional tension or trauma. And I feel that way too about the Demon of Hatred in Sekiro. He's the sculptor initially. He went through war. He was struggling with trauma.
Spoilers.
And with his emotions and feelings about his nation and like its fixation with immortality and all the wars that he had to fight. And there was just a lot going on internally with that character. And he severed his arm so that way he wouldn't succumb to his wrath or his rage. And even though his arm is severed, it grows back.
I believe Ishin cut his arm off. I don't think he cut his own arm off. I mean, I might be wrong about that, but I do believe it's not like Ichimonji's strike, but it's like Ashina Cross or something like that, where it uses a quote from Ishin where it says like he boasted that this technique could even cut off the arm of Ashura. And so, yeah, anyway. So maybe there's like a more of a story to it, but anyway, not too important. Without Horn said, they read Chaos Pyromancy's affinity for humanity to be very similar to how the bonfires are burning humanity to get more Estus. And then... Okay, so... Yeah, Chaos Pyromancy's affinity for darkness, I think is because, like, the Chaos Flame has been imbued with life, and life in some ways is tinged with the dark in Dark Souls. And so there is that kind of a through line there. But also, like, the Chaos Flame will just consume everything, which is also similar to, like, what the Dark does as well. So, anyway. You said the Dark Sign was on the neck in the DS1 cutscene, where it looks like the priestess is putting it onto the corpse. Is that the neck? Maybe. You might be right. Scowleezy always felt like Chaos was fire squared with the Abyss being dark squared. Okay. Okay. You guys are on board with the Ishin, did it? Okay.
And this big pillar of fire. So there's kind of like that very like frenzied emotional reaction that's like happening with this boss design. I love the language that he's using here. It's like really, really cool. So we see this again in Dark Souls 2. I'm not going to get super into Dark Souls 2. But I will say that there's Aldia, he's just trying to recreate the circumstances of Dark Souls 1. There's a lot of reincarnated gods and lords from Dark Souls 1 who are in 2, and Aldia specifically is researching all of the conditions of the world and the setting in 1, so that way he can try to like copy it and like remake it. And then
I would disagree with that. I don't think he's necessarily trying to copy and remake it as much as trying to find a third path beyond light and beyond dark, so that way they can overcome the Hallowing curse, and so that way they could live as men eternally, immortally, and blissfully without losing their damn minds.
The kiln is at the end, is like where we sit on the throne.
Oh yeah, and Aldia is kind of an evil tree, huh, Chadwick?
Sure enough, it's another kiln. So we see that same symbolism. But something that's really interesting about Dark Souls 2 that I love, because we see it in Elden Ring, is this introduction of fire and ice. And it's important because in Norse mythology, fire and ice are the two components that are the creation of the universe. They create the relationship between the two, and the disparity between the two causes the creation of the universe. So I love that. I love that we are starting to see that now, because that comes back later. So Dark Souls 3... we have we learn a lot of shit. But we also get this really beautiful upgraded version of the Kiln of the First Flame. It was really difficult for us to make out the tree parts of it in Dark Souls 1, but now in Dark Souls 3 they went all in to make sure that you knew that this was a fucking tree. And this is still a kiln of the First Flame. I'm assuming that there's like supposed to be, I don't know, the Kiln of the First Flame in Dark Souls 1 doesn't have a roof either. But something that is interesting about the Dark Souls 3 kiln is that there's this image here, and it looks really similar to the Berserk eclipse. It obviously looks like an eclipse. It looks like the eclipse mentioned in Elden Ring too, but this is also a crucible. Now, a crucible is a type of pot that is heat resistant, that holds metal or whatever thing you're smelting inside of it. And Cooper, big snore. New record! So this is like a little crucible pot right here. This is what's holding the new age of mankind, or gods. And then this right here is what's called a, oh my god, Cooper. The snores are real. This is what's called a vacuum crucible.
There's been times where I've like covertly slightly shaken or like tapped my dog so she would stop snoring when I'm trying to voice record at times.
And it is able to smelt and pour as if it's a crucible itself, like it's a container, but you're able to put it inside of a smelter to melt the metal, and then you pour the crucible into a smaller crucible. So there's a transference of energy and of like power, and of fire and of melted metal. The metal portion of it doesn't, it kind of pops up in Dark Souls 2 a little bit, but it really shines in Elden Ring with Marika's Age of Gold, or the Golden Order. And that's where it really, like, I feel like Miyazaki did it. Like, he was really able to make all of his elements come together, with both the blacksmithing and this like big divine tree, and the tree representing the spread of this age. And I kind of want to talk about like the root systems and stuff too. So there are,
I mean, it obviously doesn't relate to the Crucible, so that's why she doesn't mention it, but I am a little bit bummed that she didn't talk about how in the Lord of Hollows ending that the eclipse rises with the Lord of Hollows. But anyway, Chadwick says it's all the Qlipoth, sacrifice something for fuel to craft a future. And then Scowley said, although it's interesting that Chaos and the Abyss are both created from their respective elements in Souls Gone Wild. Yeah, and so I think that goes to show that like life is kind of wild intrinsically in Dark Souls, and it needs like a special setting to settle down and become still, and that way when it is agitated, that's when it like goes wild and all that stuff. Kind of like what Agdane talks about in the Crypt in DS2.
certain trees that all share a singular root system, and all of these trees on the surface would all be the same tree because they all share a root system down here. These are aspen. I grew up near some of these, and they actually would like kind of live in big chunks, and they would all change color around like the same time. It was really interesting to watch, because you can kind of see like how big their little like tree colonies were. It was really cool, and their leaves get really yellow like the Erdtree. It's wild. They're definitely not as like thick as the Erdtree though, but that could be another thing too. That could be dragon scales, but I'll get into that in another video. Segue, getting distracted, come on. We see these like little tree sprouts kind of popping up next to areas that are kind of developing their own age, which is interesting. So the Erdtree has its minor Erdtrees that share its root system. The Nox are...
And apparently that's a contentious claim, that the Erdtree shares the roots with the minor Erdtrees specifically, because many people believe that the minor Erdtrees were a byproduct of the Golden Seed specifically, although I would disagree with that. I think the minor Erdtrees are byproducts of the Erdtree's roots specifically, and the little phantom illusory trees where you get the golden seeds from are more likely from actual like golden seeds flung about after the shattering. Although I say that, I will admit that I also think that the minor Erdtrees kind of grew their own golden seeds, and that's why you fight what are they called? Ulcerated tree spirits, and that's why they drop golden seeds as well, because I think the minor Erdtrees had their own seeds.
Are trying to create their Lord of Night, and they have these pillars that are starting to branch up. They're still very like small. They're not quite there yet, but they're getting there. And then the Halig tree. The Halig tree is so close. This isn't the Halig tree itself, but it's one of the trees that's blossoming next to the Halig tree. But the Halig tree has so many pillars. The Halig tree is like almost more abundant than the Erdtree. It's kind of wild how much like further along it was than the Erdtree. It wasn't like fully finished, but like it had so much. It's kind of like nutty to think about if Michaela was able to finish what they set out to do.
So I'm a little bit confused. Is she trying to say that these pillars right here are specifically related to the Erdtree and that these ones are related to the Halig tree? Because if so, I would disagree with that just based off of like vibes and say that these are probably the trees of a bygone era that have been like petrified or potentially like burned and turned to ash. So whether or not this is supposed to parallel something like Ash Lake is, arguable. And besides these two locations, there's also a bunch of the petrified trees in the Moog area. The Mogwin Dynasty Mausoleum. Scowleasy says, whenever you leave runes behind, they form little branches growing out of the ground. Maybe the illusory trees are formed from a bunch of runes collecting in one spot. The illusory trees? Interesting. I don't know about that because they're blue, and if they were gold, I could totally see that. Which isn't to say that like that idea is something I entirely disagree with. It's just I think it'd be a similar principle, but not necessarily runes which form the illusory like mountain top trees. Unless you probably said illusory trees as like the golden ones, maybe. I was probably thinking of a different tree, like the pine conifer type ones in the mountaintops. Anyway.
It would have been bonkers. That being said, I found like, okay, we're getting that tree imagery again of like the Lord's soul being put inside of the tree, right? Like Marika is inside of the tree, and like this goes back to Dark Souls, this goes back to Demon Souls. We're putting the influence of our lords, our kings, whatever, our gods inside of the tree. And then we're getting kind of the blacksmithing stuff from Dark Souls 3 with this mention of the Crucible of Life. And there's a bunch of different ways that the Crucible's been interpreted, and I'll get into that soon. But
oh boy, that'll be fun. Alright, so there was an ad that just played. I was like trying to let it run through, hopefully. So without horns said, it's always a bad sign when you have to argue based on vibes. I would agree with that, but I also feel like her argument was also contingent on vibes. So that's why I wanted to be like very clear. Because, yeah, I think that's a fair thing to call out.
Something that Dude Man Guy on YouTube brought up, he did this really great video about Japanese translations, and the word crucible specifically is about, like the Crucible of Life is from, sorry, I can't, my brain, comes from a word in Japanese that's rutsubo, which is like pot. It is literally a crucible pot. It's one of these that I just showed you an image of. This is a crucible. This is a crucible. Fuck. Shit. That was it the whole time. So why is this important? Because it also keeps saying over and over and over again, whether or not you feel, so like there's conflict also with the Japanese.
So she's trying to say that the tree is a crucible in a way that's similar to how the first flame was found the kiln of the first flame was found within a giant tree. So yeah, I can see the parallel there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
translation side of the community, where Miyazaki's writing, he has like a very interesting writing style where he uses very like kind of older formal styles of writing. I believe that there's like certain, is it like certain kanji or something that's like very particular to a certain age, or like
Sort of.
dialect. I don't know anything about Japanese. I don't know what I'm saying, but I read that fucking Reddit post and the consensus is that it was saying that the great tree is no longer connected to the deep roots, or some roots. That's kind of like the interpretation that people have come to. And they say there is no great tree. There was never a great tree. It doesn't exist. The Erdtree is just the Erdtree. And the great tree is only mentioned in like 2 or 3 items. However, what is mentioned is the primordial versions or the primordial vestiges of the Erdtree, which states that there is an earlier version of the Erdtree, and that Erdtree was more associated with the color red.
Yep.
This is very important because Godwin's Crucible Knight, or what am I saying? Fuck, not Godwin. Godfrey. Godfrey's Crucible Knights are in primordial gold armor. And it's saying that red tinted gold armor is primordial gold. And it got me thinking about trees in general and just the nature of trees. And I bring this up again because I feel like somebody's...
I'm assuming she's going to get to it, but I just like can't wait but help jump the gun and say, you know, the Crucible tree armor is Crucible tree armor.
Age, like if we think about the symbolism of a tree being represented, or a tree being like the cradle of an age of fire, like holding the fire of a king, I find it super eloquent that tree would be like a perfect metaphor for that. Because say if you have an Erdtree and you give birth to people and they get their like minor Erdtrees, it's like if your tree dies, you're literally passing on your legacy through your like family trees in a way. But trees are also really like a beautiful symbol because kingdoms can be passed on in a multitude of ways. Do you know what I mean? It can be passed on through these little offspring, or trees can be cut off, trees can be set on fire, trees can be, you know, like absorb other cultures or absorb other nutrients from their surroundings. So I feel like the way in which trees...
Oh man, I didn't realize the combo counter was over 100.
can end, or like die, or change, or grow, is just like a really beautiful analogy for like how human societies kind of change hands and grow. There's a lot of people have mentioned that there's like a lot of you know, there's a lot of Celtic and Norse like imagery going on in the series, but there's also a lot of Catholic and Latin imagery going on in the series. And for anybody that is like a history buff, y'all know the history between Catholicism and the Irish and like Scandinavian cultures. There was a lot of attempts of assimilation and the spread that wasn't necessarily so like accepted, and there was a lot of fighting, and there was just a lot. And when you are assimilating like other cultures into your belief system, it's almost like you are changing them, you are like cutting them off, there's all this like manipulation that's happening. And it's really cool because there's this really colorful language that Miyazaki uses in order to like illustrate these characters and the way in which they manipulate trees.
So part of the reason why I think the Crucible stuff is talking about blending everything together kind of relates to what she's saying right there, where everything gets assimilated over time into the culture. And I do believe that the original Erdtree is the Crucible, and I don't mean like the thing that came before the Erdtree. I think like literally the Erdtree, whenever it became a thing, which I would argue was most likely in the Age of Godfrey, based off of like the fire giant timeline, talking about the birth of the Erdtree and whatnot, that was the Crucible period for a number of reasons, because of like all of the Crucible Knights are subservient to Godfrey. that there's like a bunch of stuff to tie into it, but most specifically, the Crucible Knight armor says it pretty explicitly that the original Erdtree was the Crucible. So, okay. And then I was thinking about addressing like the whole Great Tree stuff, but I might not do that, at least not right now. So, go back to the video.
I mentioned in my previous video, like Godric the Grafted, for example. You can do skin grafting, but it's very much a thing about trees. You graft trees. Like, that's a thing. And specifically, fruit trees are able to take on like so many different types of species. Like you can grow 2 different fruits on the same tree. It was very like analogous with Godric, you know, sticking all these different parts on himself. It's just like really cool to see him use all of this like colorful language, and it is a shame that like it's easy for us to lose a lot of this through the English translation. But for those of you who are Great Tree believers, something that I personally love is that the tree is depicted in the Crucible armor multiple times, and there's something down in Deep-Root Depths that is a little tree that Celuria, I don't know how to pronounce her name, this girl is protecting. She's standing in front of it, and when you go inside, you get I believe it's the Crucible armor, or you get her staff, or she drops her staff. But this tree is shaped exactly like the Erdtree, in the sense that it has like a door to go inside of it. It's like hollowed out. It would be a perfect kiln or crucible. Like it would be a perfect thing to hold a flame of a lord. And it's also super interesting because this tree's root systems are like all of these end. Like a lot of these look like they're cut, and they don't intersect with any of the other major root systems that go through the Deep-Root Depths. So that translation could be right. It could be saying that, like the way that that person translated it on Reddit, where they were saying that like there is no Great Tree. That is probably true, but I do think that there was a tree that was from a previous age that did house the Lord's souls and was a part of the root system to some.
All right. So since I got brought back up, I'll just bring my spreadsheet over. So this is all the times that the term like Great Tree appears in both English and Japanese. The Japanese for it I have highlighted in orange. It's taiju, like literally big tree, and then sometimes you'll have the character for roots attached to them. So you could have big tree roots, or literally, great tree plus roots, or literally great plus tree roots. That's kind of contentious. I think it's most likely that it should be read with great tree being a thing and then like the root kanji next to it, as opposed to tree root being a compound kanji, because that's just not how FromSoft has referred to it in their previous games. But that doesn't mean that tree root is like ungrammatical or anything like that. So anyway, what I'm saying is Great Tree is sort of a thing, but it doesn't refer to a different tree. It refers to the Erdtree itself specifically. And part of the reason we know this is because of the tree NB surcoat, which is called like the Great Tree NB surcoat in Japanese. And the description makes it abundantly clear that the Great Tree that it's referencing, the surcoat depicts the distant Erdtree and the Beast Regent. So the Erdtree is the tree on the Tree and Beast surcoat, which is the Great Tree and Beast surcoat. So with that understanding, it becomes easier to talk about some of this other stuff, but you can still come to that conclusion regardless, because Deathroot and the root resin descriptions talk about how Godwyn is buried essentially at the roots of the Erdtree in the Prince of Death's pustule. So Deathroot says, on the night of the dire plot, the stolen rune of death enabled the first death of a demigod. Later, the rune of death spread across the lands between through the underground roots of the Great Tree, sprouting in the form of Deathroot. So, where was Godwyn buried at the roots of the Erdtree, according to the Prince of Death's pustule? It said he's buried deep under the capital at the Erdtree's roots. And then root resin kind of makes him sound distinct in both English and Japanese, to be honest, but with the broader context of the game, I would argue that when it's saying that the great tree roots are once connected to those of the Erdtree, or so it said, I think this might be meant to reference the minor Erdtrees, even though it doesn't use like the small character to represent minor in front of them. So the way that I mentally gymnastic reconcile this odd description is that the roots of the golden trees were once connected to those of the great tree, the big ass tree outside Lane Dell. So that's kind of how it works. And then here too begins the network of great tree roots that spread through the lands between. And part of the reason why I think these are meant to talk about minor Erdtree roots is because of how minor Erdtrees are found next to catacombs, which maybe I should have like put that one in here. So anyway, in the minor catacombs, you see like a bunch of death root and pretty much all of them, which is what like reanimates the skeletons. So yeah, that's just kind of why I am a great tree denier and I am an Erdtree truther. So Crucible Knight Celeria, celery, daughter of lettuce. Yada says, is that person on Reddit LP or are you misremembering? So I'm trying to remember who made the first post, but I did comment on it with my disagreement for pretty much the same reasons. So she might be like confusing both of us if she read both the initial post and my comment reply to it. Anyway. JJ Lewis, welcome to the stream. Something important about grafting, you can only graft related species that produce the same kind of fruit. So for instance, you could have one tree with multiple types of apples or a cherry/plum tree. That's a very good point, but you can't have an apple and a pear tree, for example. Godfrey grafts the Tarnished, trolls, and a dragon to himself. Might imply some kind of blood relation between demigods, Tarnished, trolls, giants, and dragons. The Great Tree wasn't always golden, and it's the golden tree that has come to be called the Erdtree. The Great Tree may have also been called the Erdtree, but it wasn't golden. So that might be a thing because there is the potential, even though I'm like denying the Great Tree, that there could have been a kind of Great Tree or another tree that existed before the Erdtree. But as far as the terminology of the game goes, the Great Tree, in my estimation, is a specific reference to the Erdtree. So why do I say all of this stuff yet still possibly entertain the idea of a tree predating the Erdtree? That would be because of the depiction of the Elden Ring with like a bunch of roots in Fair Missoula. So there might have been something, but there is never any really explicit references as to what that something was. And so until we get more info about it, I will just need to stay skeptical because I can't disprove a negative, you know? So anyway, all right, going back to the video.
Some degree, and I think that the Crucible Knight guarding this one, like especially one of the major ones, she's the boss. She's like really fucking important to Godfrey.
Chris asks, wasn't that really all Quelaag was saying, that there could have been a precursor? Yes, but no, and this is why like I'm pedantic about this kind of thing, because the Great Tree, in my understanding of the text, is a specific reference to the Erdtree, which is related to the Crucible, and if there is a tree before the Erdtree, then I would argue that's not related to the Crucible, whereas many people would say the Great Tree is more related to the Crucible and like a primordial soup. But that's just a something that's just kind of like irreconcilable, that you just kind of need to like pick a stance and just kind of go with it. So to reiterate that, hopefully in a bit more clearer terms, is that the Great Tree is the Erdtree is the Crucible. So Great Tree is the Crucible, which is a little bit different than the Crucible being a primordial ooze, which predates the actual Erdtree. So that's kind of why I harp on this so much.
The fact that Godfrey had this woman guarding this little tree down there is like pretty suspicious to me. I feel like this says a lot to me about this like transference of age. And something else that's really interesting if you read all of the aspects of the Crucible stuff, all of the Crucible talismans, it talks about how there's a primordial nature of the tree. Even in the Japanese version, it talks about the primordial form of the Erdtree. And it talks about how this mixture of kind of like overgrown feral primordial life was seen as like holy or devout, and then became seen as like barbaric and became disdained. Like it's like a vestige of like a time that nobody likes. Nobody likes it. It's stinky as bad. I don't like it.
So just to get on my pedantic soapbox again, technically the Japanese doesn't say like the primordial form. It just says the original Erdtree, which, I mean, it seems like I'm really splitting hairs here. I understand that. But the reason why I think this is important is primordial form, to me, could imply that it has an actual different form, obviously, whereas the original Erdtree makes it still sound like a tree and not necessarily a thing which could have predated the Erdtree. So, okay.
In addition to the tree helm being super important, which is this one, the other symbol, so there's two main knights of Godfrey's like Crucible knights. They're like the main ones. There's the tree knight that represents this like old tree that we see down in the deeper depths. And then there is the axe helm, which represents Godfrey's weapon. Godfrey loves using axes. It represents Godfrey kind of leading the Crucible Knights. Like that was his era to a degree. And I feel like the primeval gold, this red gold, was definitely represented. We keep seeing this red of the past. We keep seeing like ancient warriors used to go to this afterlife called Helfin, and they would see a red grace to go there. The dragons used to use red lightning. The gold used to be red tinted gold. There's like this constant motif of like, well, society used to be red, but now it's gold. Like, in all these different areas across the game. It's like not just in one specific area. It's like all over the damn place. And then also,
all right. Hey, Revenant, welcome back to the stream. Yes, the stream should be archived on the live section of my channel tabs. So Beans and Rice said, so the original Erdtree makes it sound there was a different Erdtree in the past even more. So yes, but no, depending on like what exactly you're perceiving of that Erdtree being. I am of the opinion that the Erdtree during Godfrey's time is the quote-unquote original Erdtree, the one that's synonymous with the Crucible. But I would argue from that point on, once Radagon became the Elden Lord, the nature of the Erdtree changed into being perfect and eternal. And so that is reflected in a couple item descriptions that I'll just pull up. Why is this like getting stuck right here? Is it like getting the window? It's so weird that it keeps happening. Anyway, let's go back to the actual stuff. Perfect and eternal. So in the Crimson Seed and Cerulean Seed talismans, it says, the Erdtree was once perfect and eternal, and thus it was believed that Erdtree seeds could not exist. So this time of the Erdtree being perfect and eternal is at odds with the Age of Abundance being associated with Godfrey and only existing for a fleeting moment because that abundance ran out, essentially. So to me, it seems like there should be a direct contradiction with something being abundant and losing its abundance versus it being perfect and eternal, because losing one's abundance kind of flies in the face of it being eternal to me. So that's why I would argue that Godfrey's Erdtree was fundamentally different than Radagon's, even though it is still literally the same tree. It's just that I think Radagon altered the order of the universe when he became Elden Lord and integrated his Elden Rune, as it's called, into the Elden Ring. So for those who might not know what that is or are skeptical about it, when you look at the logo of the Elden Ring, you've got the kind of shattered Elden Ring in the background, obviously, but Let me pull it up. All right, here's the logo. And so back here, you have like the lattice structure that you can see on the door to the Erdtree. So that's what like Radigan's seal uses to keep us out of the Erdtree. So it's been actually fully integrated into the ring. And so I don't believe that this in the back was part of the Elden Ring during Godfrey's tenure as Elden Lord. It does look like there was a wooden Erdtree because there's a sliver of the wood. The new one is the illusory tree. I don't necessarily think it's like fully illusory because when you go to like the minor Erdtree church in Altus Plateau / Lane Dell, it's like half gold, half wood. I just think the Erdtree is more brilliant. So I'm not really like a full illusory tree believer. Chris P says, you always thought the ancient form of the Erdtree would have had red leaves like the trees in Fair Missoula. So it's kind of an interesting thing that you mentioned, like the leaves specifically, because there could have been a hint about that as well, and the form of the Erdleaf flowers, I think. Erdleaf. Erdleaf. So, not the faded one, because that's like the Scarlet Rot one. So, Erdleaf flowers are a dusky yellow flower that has started to fade to brown, found throughout the lands between. Said to be fed by leaves that fell from the Erdtree in days of antiquity. So these ones are fading because the Erdtree that they receive sustenance from is no longer the same Erdtree, and they're starting to kind of fade similarly perhaps to the Tarnished. I mean, not exactly, but anyway. That's kind of like another environmental hint, I believe, in the changing nature of the Erdtree over time. JJ says, what if the Erdtree isn't a tree, though? Or rather, it emerged from the dead / dying husk of the original tree. The only golden plants are the Erdtree, illusory trees, the unique minor Erdtrees, and mushroom. Maybe gold stems from the mushrooms, which you guess could have come from the golden star. It's an IRL theory that life came from meteors and may have been fungal in nature. So, fungus does have a symbiotic relationship with a lot of trees. All right. So, I mean, I can't really speak too much to the mushroom theory because, I mean, I do think the Erdtree is a tree. I do think there is the potential that the current Erdtree could have been grafted onto the stump of a tree, perhaps by Godfrey, and hence why you could have like the Crucible Axe Knights, because axes could be used to chop down trees. But unfortunately, that does go so far like away from the text. I can only ever just like treat it as open-ended conjecture.
So, in addition to like the tree motif, Siluria's tree, the primordial form of the Erdtree, is close to nature and life itself, and the spear is modeled on its crucible. It's imbued with ancient holy essence. This and
Oh yeah, and so one of the other things about like the ancient holy essences is that they are more of a Godfrey type thing, and so there are other environmental storytelling details to suggest that the Erdtree during the time of Godfrey had a different style of blessing than the current Erdtree, in my opinion.
her tree stuff, like I mentioned, is found here. So if there is a great tree, I believe it would be this little tiny, scrawny, burnt, disconnected, dead-ass tree. Perfect! It kind of represents Horalu and the tribe kind of era. I don't think that the tribe people lived down in the Nameless City. I don't think that they were native to this area. The Badlands I always felt like was somewhere outside of the Lands Between. Correct me if I'm wrong. I actually have no clue. This is a nameless eternal city, so I feel like this is more associated with the Nox and the Newman. It could I personally, this is like fan theory time. I personally feel like this could have been Marika's city that she was from, because her name is Marika the Eternal, and she knew the Black Knife assassins who were also Nox people. So it wouldn't surprise me if they were all originally from one of these Eternal cities, specifically the Nameless one. because it's literally at the base of the fucking Erdtree. So it makes sense that they would build the capital like above. I also kind of want to like talk a little bit. I mentioned that the Erdtree was dying before. Just kind of briefly, I talked about Goldmask to some of my friends, which is why all these like scribbles are here. Goldmask made a realization that Queen Marika and the gods were being very fickle and were trying to cheat death. We find this not only through causality and regression, but also through order healing and litany of proper death. He finds that how all the learned and the learnedness to be reduced to the ravings of fanatics, all of the good and the great wanted and their foolishness was an absolute evil to contend with. Does such a notion exist in the fundamentals of order? And then obviously Marika was supposed to pass on her lineage after death. After the Erdtree died, she was supposed to pass it on. And it just seems like she was never able to let go of her tree. And
we got the Gwyn parallels coming back right and center.
I feel like there was also some kind of disconnect or transition away from Godfrey as well during this time. And I don't know if it was intentional, because she directs him to be exiled so that way he can go become strong and teach the Tarnished to become strong. So it could have been, you know, Queen Marika playing 4D chess to like get us to come back and fucking kill God or some shit. But like, I don't know. She is so shady. It's hard. It's hard for me to like when if we get the DLC and we get to go back in the past, I'm gonna lose it, because I have so much stuff I want to see and talk about. Oh, also a brief little thing. I have this little section that's like, why tree? Why fire? Why did he pick these symbols? I think we already kind of covered them a little bit, but something that I really love about these symbols that he chose particularly is that they're cross-cultural symbols. They're something that both are concepts that appear in all cultures all across the world, and they all relatively have the same meaning, which is really unique, because you have all these cultures that may or may not be mingling or talking or sharing belief systems. Like, some may be isolated, but some may be like colonizing or like assimilating people. It's really lovely to see that there is this just impression that we as humans have about certain things. Like, obviously fire hurt, fire ow, but fire also make food, and like fire also power kilns and make technology. So a lot of cultures see.
Yeah, and most cultures, I think, around the world have a myth of fire being stolen from the gods. So it does kind of like tickle my fancy that Adon stole fire from the like fire monks, I guess, rather than like the fire giants. So I'm also like slightly disappointed at that like that wasn't the first time that they really got fire. But anyway,
fire as both a very creative and destructive force, and in the wrong hands, it can become very out of control and frenzied and chaotic and destructive. But in the right hands, it can be used to create art and food and sustenance. So it's both a giver of life and of order and of age, but also a destructive force. So I find that fucking cool. It's tight. And then with the Tree of Life, we obviously have the Cosmic Tree or the World Tree, which a lot of us are familiar with Norse mythology, which has 3 tier systems. There's the Underworld, the Human World, so this would be the lands between. This would be Deeproot Depths and Noxtella and fucking what's the other one? Nokron. And this would be like Farum Azula, probably. Maybe the capital would be like down here or something. And then like the ancestral spirit would be like down here, like doing its thing with its sprouting its horns. I also really love the tree motif coming out of the ancestral spirits too, because the cow hippie people that live down underground, they abstain from using language or metalworking. So they are like cutting off culture and like humanity from themselves. and allowing themselves to bud into like these big ancestral spirits that then create trees. So they're like negating humanity in order to pursue becoming a world or becoming a tree, which is fucking also cool as hell. You love to see it. Here's the outcome. If you actually go visit the ancestral spirit corpses down in the deeper depths and you hold up a torch next to it, they actually have like the color of trees. It's like brown branches with like green little leaves, which is really cool. Another
And I wonder if like the bluish color of the ancestral spirits is meant to signify that even without runes, you could still have a similar kind of being exist, which might tie into like the ethereal blue conifer style trees that you find on the mountaintops of the giants. I might need to think about that a bit more. So Ava says Merrick and Gwyn share some of the same clown tainted brain cells. Then JJ Lewis said the difference between Merrick and Gwyn is that Gwyn was pimping at his height, and Merrick appears to have always just been the vessel of a star god's vision. We don't know enough about Merrick to say that for sure. But yeah. Reject humanity, return to tree. Truly the Dark Souls 3 modus operandi right there. The existence of cow hippies makes you want to go cow hippie tipping. What is a cow hippie? Should I regret asking that?
Another little cool little factoid is that this is the Tree of Life, also known as the Philosopher's Tree. I want to thank Zeostorm for talking about alchemy. I will link Zeostorm's video again. And it is depicted as a double helix, which the Elden Stars are also depicted as a double helix. You see the Elden Stars double helix thing here too. This is so fucking gnarly. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that whole imagery right there is super obvious in like the hailing tree symbol. That was just a funny frame to pause on.
And then also the symbol for Mercury. So the double helix is the symbol for Mercury. Mercury is also the symbol used for intersex people, which is really cool because Michaela's needle has properties.
That straight up sounds like a fart. As far as like intersex people, one other really interesting item in Elden Ring that got cut was like the I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was an umbilical cord that would allow the user to change their gender, and it was supposed to be like related to America, except it like looped in on itself, which was really fascinating to me because if it's an umbilical cord that's a loop that like just kind of loops in on itself, that would imply that mother and child are both one and the same, which might have some very interesting lore connotations when we consider some and or all of America's children, but mostly some millennia. No, damn it, Melina. The names are too similar. And so yeah, what was I saying about loops and stuff? I'm losing it. That's what it is. Mothers do receive some cells from their babies. It's crazy. Yeah, but I mean, it's true that like some mothers can reabsorb their babies and kind of have a terminated pregnancy that way. But generally speaking, it's not as though it isn't a loop. There's like one connected to the other. It's not just like a self-fulfilling pregnancy type thing. I guess that could also be a symbol of her godhood. It could be a kind of, I don't want to say like an immaculate conception because I mean that's completely wrong, but it's like a similar idea, like an immaculate birth, one without like a real mother. Huh. It's weird.
Mercury, because it separates different alloys from each other, so it can separate gold from other metals from the influence of outer gods, and it has this
Bella asks, isn't there a biology theory about all babies being female in the womb? Yes. So the X chromosome like gets duplicated and then something happens later on in the cycle to turn the second X chromosome into a Y chromosome, which controls maleness. But again, that's like my seventh grade science class level biology of information. So it might be a lot more nuanced than that.
It has this really beautiful double helix going on. And Michaela appears as a female in people's dreams and as a male to people in real life. So that's fucking tight. And Queen Marika and Radagon are also both male, female, like a single person. So you love to see it. I fucking love video games. I hope this was informative and helpful. I'm tired.
I feel that.
This is a long video. Okay, bye. Oh yeah, I fucking forgot to just say what the fuck is a crucible.
I was
A
wondering.
crucible is a metal jar that pours liquid hot metal, and the tree represents the age and reality, fabric of reality. And if you pour the hot metal into the Empyrean, that is the place where God's will and man's will gets combined into one will. That would be inside of the body of the Empyrean. Like,
All right, so real talk, one thing that I've been wondering lately is between Marika's relationship with runes and life, more specifically, because in the before times, the runes seem to be more associated with life and redness, and in the after times, a lot of that redness has gone away. So was Marika distilling life away from runes or something along those lines? I don't know. It's something that I've just like been thinking about a little bit more recently, and I kind of like want to look into it a bit more. And I say like look into it, it's just more like, oh, these are like passing thoughts that I just haven't like fully entertained here. So why is this so bothersome or like relevant to me right now? It's just because do runes like represent metal in this analogy of like kilns and crucibles and whatnot? And if so, would melting the metal mean like melting the life away from the runes into like the lands between or into her Erdtree? Maybe. I don't know. It's worth exploring a bit more.
Queen Marika, when she's like she's like hanging. What I'm trying to say is that the crucible would be the thing that's pouring the metal, and the container that is holding the hot metal. The tree is the fucking crucible. That's all.
Yeah, and as usual, that was a really good video by Quelaag, despite it being a little bit disjointed and facepalmy at times. So I'm going to go ahead and link it into the chat if you guys want to give her a like and or a sub and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and like it myself. I'm already subscribed. Right. And so as I'd mentioned like earlier in the video, she says the tree is the crucible, which is more or less reconfirmed in the Silurian tree helmet description. Let me just pull that up for convenience's sake. Siluria, not the woe. Alright, Siluria's tree. No, that's the spear. Well, okay, this will be like one part of it. The primordial form of the Erdtree is close in nature to life itself, and this spear, modeled on its crucible, is imbued with an ancient holy essence. And again, like, it isn't necessarily the primordial form, it's literally like the crucible's origins, not oranges. Damn it. The Erdtree's origins are closer to life, and that which its crucible is what the spear is modeled on. It possesses an ancient holiness. Anyway, The Crucible Tree Helm says, the great tree ornamentation is the Knight Siluria's mark, displayed also by her men. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erdtree, strengthens, blah, 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 blah. So, again, primordial form of the Erdtree is different. Right here, it's worded so strangely that it can only, in my opinion, be interpreted as the beginning or the original Erdtree houses the power of the Crucible of Life, and it strengthens Crucible aspect incantations. So it is like worded a bit strangely, but it's so weird that they call it like the original Erdtree here. And because of that specifically, it forces my hand into saying that the original Erdtree was the Crucible. And the Crucible is modeled on, well, the Crucible, the Silurian tree spear is modeled on the Crucible, which is also a tree. So Quelaag is correct for saying like the Crucible is a tree at the end of her video. TA put out a DS1 video earlier today. Yeah, I heard about that. I'm kind of not interested, to be honest. Quelaag is neurodivergent and her videos are neurodivergent core. Feels bad because I feel like there's a lot to relate with in that. That was one of her COVID recovery period videos? Okay. Captini, welcome back into this stream. What does the word Silurian mean? Is it any way related to Silurian hypothesis? I'm not entirely sure what you mean like this by this Silurian hypothesis, but Siluria most likely comes from like the Silurian epoch. I don't know exactly how to refer to it. So let's go ahead and visit the old reliable Wikipedia, and so, oh no, Wikipedia can't be sold. All right, so Silurian is a specific, I know, is a specific like time period, and along with the Silurian period and like the Silurian extinction event, there was an Ordovician period as well. So Silurian is here in like this middle bracket, and it covers all of these ages. I don't know exactly what you want to call them exactly. So Paleozoic, let's just type that. So we got the Silurian right here, and this is really hard to read, but the Ordovician period. And there's also like a Flow one and a Darwinian period as well. But the name of Flow got switched away from a Crucible Knight and got used for one of the Bloodhound Knights. So it's something that they probably played around with in development of some of the names. And then I wonder also if Devonian it got like repurposed to Devon, like the D brother. But anyway, hopefully that explains your question. The Silurian hypothesis is about if there was technology back in those times, we would not have a way to know it because of rotation of the surface and stuff. I would need to look into that a bit more because I'm completely unfamiliar with that. Ava loves how Quelaag's videos are cozy and they're made in a way where you can pay attention the whole time. Sweets. All right, so that was a good, fun video. Now we'll go ahead and transition into We All Got Bamboozled by Gransax by Moxie Watts.
Gransax.
Okay. Silures was also the name of a powerful and warlike tribe or tribal confederation of ancient Britain, according to Wikipedia. So I think the names were of like the periods were also named after those tribes, but with there also being Ordovis and Flow, I am more likely to believe it's more of like an age type thing rather than these ancient tribes. It's kind of like an Ancient Aliens kind of thing. Okay, thanks, Stella.
Gransax only attacked the capital one time. This started the war with the ancient dragons. Allegedly. It most likely took place during the Liurnian Wars. This began a bitter war between the Erdtree capital and the ancient dragons. While this all seems very straight to the point, I think the thing that stumps most Tarnished is how and why Gransax did it. So, hear me out. I'm Moxie, and this is Heavy Speculation.
Yeah, and so I kind of agree that I think the most likely period for Gransax's attack would have been when Radagon was in Liurnia, because Godwyn is the one defending the capital, which is very frustrating because, like, where the hell is Godfrey if he hasn't been hounded from the lands between? His armies are supposed to have been unbowed and undefeated, yet I don't know, he left like the back lines completely exposed for Gransax. So I guess not completely because Godwyn like defended it and everything. But why the hell did his campaign take so long that Radagon could form a family and everything? And then, yeah, it's just kind of frustrating to me.
The following theories will definitely be more crackpot. As per the title of the series, sometimes there won't be a ton of evidence. However, I feel like the Souls community needs more fun, speculative theories to chew on. This series is just getting started, so if you like Elden Ring lore, remember to subscribe to the channel. It's free and it helps a ton. Let's start with what is known about the ancient dragons. Gravelstone Seal. Sacred seal made from gravelstone, thought to be an ancient dragon scale, enhances dragon cult incantations of the royal capital. The worship of the ancient dragons does not conflict with the belief of the Erdtree. After all, this seal and lightning itself are both imbued with gold. The first thing we can establish is the ancient dragon worship and the worship of the Erdtree are both imbued with gold, which could mean that they have grace depending on how you look at this. The Gravelstone seal also matches the scales on Placidusax. Our Tarnished can investigate a peculiar scene in Fair Missoula. There are runes to loot on some of the human corpses left here. I'm not sure if this is trying to depict a struggle between the beastmen and these humans who allegedly were part.
And this kind of comes back to like one of those issues of, is this just asset reuse or is this actually supposed to be significant lore? There's just a bunch of random ass humans that are dead in Fair Missoula. I mean, some of them are probably a bit more diegetic, like the Drake Knight guy, but you know what I mean.
Part of the capital's ancient dragon cult, almost as if they're trying to run out with the secrets of the ancient dragon
Although the Drake Knight set is only in a chest, so maybe not.
cult before anyone noticed, and were slaughtered in the act, regardless of the scene in front of us. The precious item on one of these bodies is the ancient dragon prayer book of the capital's ancient dragon cult. A lost tome that never reached the lands between, contains red lightning incantations. Now, the part where it says never reached the lands between kind of implies it was intended to reach the capital. Perhaps these were aristocrats who were studying ancient dragon incantations under beastmen. Off a body on a balcony nearby is Rune 12.
And so the whole thing about it never reaching the lands between is more of a product of localization. The Japanese for it says that it's not told in the lands between or like not communicated, which doesn't mean that it never reached it, which, you know, might just be splitting hairs, but it might be like notable that it could have been there, but is currently no longer in the lands between at the very least. JJ Lewis says the ancient British tribes sound like the kind of obscure history GRM would borrow, let's say, for his own fantasy storylines. And Chris P says could just be layered reference. Both can be right. Yeah, a lot of layered references throughout the game, so you're inclined to agree. Okay.
Grace that dwells within the inhabitants of the lands between, the lingering residue of gold, used to gain many runes. The grace of gold blessed those who were first to serve it with the most vivid coloration. Then, looted up a body next to some beastmen skeletons, there are gravelstone bolts described as bolt tipped with the shards of gravelstone, deals powerful lingering damage, used by worshippers of the ancient dragons. And gravelstone is a small clump of shard, pointed stones, material used.
Beans and Rice says, not gonna lie, I feel like a level or area or enemy placement takes a lot more work than changing text. You're surprised that I never treat the text as dismissively as I treat the diegetic storytelling. It's kind of funny to say that I don't treat the text dismissively, because, yeah, I mean, aside from the translation stuff, as Hilko just kind of mentions, welcome to the stream, is that I do dismiss quite a lot of text, specifically when it's written as hearsay. But beyond that, I mean, yes, text can change, and it has changed, especially as the game has been patched. and I do treat those with varying degrees of respect, depending on how much I think it is informative of like the current state of the game. But as far as like the reusage of assets, it's something that's been like problematic for a long time in FromSoft games, and part of the reason why I'm a bit more dismissive of the visual imagery is because quite a lot of it isn't necessarily handcrafted, sculpted to be where it is, as though like it was made specifically for the game. So one example of this is in Farum Azula. We've got the statues of Charlemagne and the Virgin of Paris that can be found in Notre Dame, which is like Mary cradling an infant Jesus that holds a ball. And I guess I could like show some pictures of it. Give me a moment. And those statues appear in Bloodborne as well. So not only are they in both Farum Azula, in Elden Ring and Bloodborne, these are just literally copy pasted from real life statues. This is literally Charlemagne or Charles the Great, and this is Mary. So are you telling me that Jesus exists in the lands between? Like, that's part of why I'm more dismissive of visual stuff, because when you tunnel vision on this stuff too much, I think you miss the forest for the trees at times. So while I don't entirely dismiss it, I do think like this can have some like thematic storytelling relevance. It does make me less likely to be on board with them, because while I don't necessarily think Charles the Great and or the Virgin Mary existed in the lands between, we might be able to just look at these as a regal kingly type figure and a regal queenly type figure of humans in a beastman colony. And if we treat it that way, it's a little bit more palatable, but it is also like a little bit more questionable, like what exactly the relationship between the beastmen and the humans are in Farum Azula specifically. And I think even that much could be a little bit questionable, but a little bit less questionable when we go into the Malekith boss room and find the other praying woman statue. That makes it more likely to me that these statues could actually have a bit more significance. So I would disagree that I would just like completely dismiss like a lot of visual stuff. I try to, of course, in my own biased way, be what I would argue as like a bit as fair and balanced as I think I can be. Stella says, we know bosses have been moved around areas in most of the game. And yeah, going back to that, like I just said a moment ago, like talking about Ordovis and Siluria and Flow, we know that like those got moved a bit around in development as well. So yeah. Hilko asks, how much use has been made of data mining to, say, ascertain the order in which enemies and assets were placed to maybe see what got attention first? That's a good question. You'd probably need to talk to the data miners first, because obviously there's still like some event flags that are from earlier relics of development that you can get a little bit more info from, but I don't have the particulars about those to speak about it. And I'm not entirely sure how clear it is, like what got made when in development from looking at the files. Not that like that isn't possible. I just have no idea about that right now. Like I'm sure like there's probably some relics of like when the files are modified and whatnot, but yeah, that's just kind of beyond my knowledge. How much of written history is lost? A lot more than the diegetic history. So there's a difference between written history and like the diegetic history, because the author of the item descriptions is a limited omniscient third person author. So it's not as though like you're going around in Bloodborne and reading notes that have been left on the ground. These are like the voice of God, more or less, telling you something about the state of the game world, which I think, who are we to like deny the voice of God? And as soon as you begin to doubt one item description's verisimilitude, that opens up a can of worms in which you can literally doubt all in every item's description. And so once you do that, you literally make it so that you cannot have a productive conversation with anybody about the lore. I mean, obviously, this is a little bit of hyperbole, because if you can't agree on the most basic facts of the game, what common ground can you share to hold a good faith discussion? All right, no problem, Hilko, and that was a good question. And JJ Lewis says those images are chosen for a reason beyond aesthetics, though. Like those figures symbolize something in the game. E.g., Charlemagne was a precursor to Holy Roman Empire. And yes, that is one other way you can read it. But again, because this was reused from Bloodborne, I don't necessarily know if that's the most accurate reason, or if it's something more like they still have the rights to that 3D image, and so they're just saving on costs by reusing something that kind of can be repurposed in a way that is conducive to the type of environmental storytelling that they want to do. Could the author not want the written history to have holes? I mean, yes, it definitely does have holes. Holy Roman Empire shares some key similarities to the Golden Order that can help interpret lore. Like understanding of major world empires like the Romans, Greeks, Assyrians, etc. provide some context. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Stella says, plus when it comes to statues, it's not like some of them can't have been moved from somewhere else in the universe. In real life, there's Egyptian obelisk in Rome for a reason. Yeah, and that's another thing, and it is interesting to see what assets are reused in different locations and trying to determine in good faith whether or not those are lore significant. And so, one of the major examples to me about the reusage of assets being potentially very significant story wise, but I think most people just kind of tend to ignore it because they don't want to think about it, is that in Fair Missoula, there is a kind of Chloranthy style symbol, which is, reused from Dark Souls 3. Hold on. So here is the Chloranthy style symbol used in Fair Missoula. This is in Dark Souls 3, like in Archdragon Peak and right outside Osiris' door in the Consumed King's Garden. And this is also found within the innermost sanctum of the Erdtree Sanctuary. So if this type of stonework is identical in Fair Missoula and the Erdtree Sanctuary, would that not suggest the two had a similar or not, or if not an identical culture? Maybe, and that's just really troubling to think about. Or at the very least, the same Masons. Not saying ignore the text, but the text is barely there. Your point is paying attention to the text only tells you very little. Do you think I'm only paying attention to the text? I mean, look at every stream I've done, look at every video I've done. It's never just the text. Isn't there a tapestry from the Ring City before Midir somewhere in Elden Ring 2? Maybe. I don't remember if the. Oh, yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Okay, yeah, I do have images of that as well. I think I titled it Banner. So yes, the banners that can be, or not like banners, but like rugs or whatnot that are found in the Ringed City are also in Elden Ring. One I know for certain is in the church in Stormvale. So let me see. I've got so many banner pictures. Should be more recent. All right, so maybe I didn't title it banner. I'll check tapestry. Right, definitely not tapestry. Oh no, wrong one. Nope, wrong one. Okay. Man, I don't remember what I titled it. It's got to be way down here then, right? I've just got too many images. Probably be faster to like search on the Discord. All right, let me do that real quick. And if I don't find it in the next couple minutes, I will just like continue so that way I'm not like just stalling for time. Uh, Emblem? Damn it. Yeah, I just don't remember what I called it off the top of my head. But yeah, you're definitely right about that. It's probably a bit of both. Elden Ring seems to have placed much more emphasis on the significance of architecture and assets, reused or not, than their past games. Maybe. Is that the asset that was also used in Pillars of Eternity? Do you mean Path of Exile? Like the pillar? I'm not sure what Pillars of Eternity is. Clearly need more and more specific folders for images. Okay. Yeah, so the Path of Exile thing is also something worth considering. And there's like another statue with the dude like in a knight armor that has like a baby crawling off of him, which came from like some random French castle or something like that, cathedral. All right. If you guys keep taunting me about this, I will take the time to look for it and have a slow, boring stream. Don't you tempt me with a mediocre time. Hmm. Oh, okay. I figured out how I could look for it. Ringed City Crest. Okay, I found it, guys. All right, so this is in Stormvale, and this is like one angle of it. This is the other angle, like face down. And so this is also Stormvale. Don't I have like the Ringed City picture? Hold on. Let me just type in Crest. It might just not be in this folder. But anyway, this does definitely appear in the Ringed City in or like right before like Medir's place, and you could have like the Lothric Knight sword on top of it and everything like that. Ringed City. I wonder if I like took footage of it. Oh, I think I know what I did. I think I just manually took a screenshot or like a snippet of a screenshot from like my stream of it when I like used the 3 hour footage. So I'm definitely not going to go look for that. Anyway. Yeah, the whole beans, what you're talking about is like a localization thing. I'm not, that's something that I would discard. And you say that I don't discard text. You're kind of coming at me bad faith, and I don't appreciate that. All right. You're welcome, Hilko, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, going back to the video now.
Used for crafting items. Such compound stones found in the lands between once beset by ancient dragons are said to be the scales of those very beasts. One of those very beasts is Placidusax, the first Elden Lord. The Dragon King's Craigblade, piercing gravelstone sword containing the primeval lightning, a portion of the Dragon Lord's power, gained from a remembrance. This weapon commands great power over paltry, mortal dragons of today. Unique skill, thundercloud form. Temporarily transform into a red thundercloud and fly through the air. Then plunge down with a lightning-infused blade. Hold to increase the reach of the thundercloud form. One of the things Placidusax does is the thundercloud form. It goes off and reappears in the thundercloud. This is somewhat reminiscent of the move that Radon performs. Regardless, the important thing to take from this is that the weapons causes the wielder to temporarily turn into a thundercloud, and that the blade becomes charged and lightning infused. Keep this in mind as we move forward.
Alright, so Scalise also points it out, but it's Dragon King's Craigblade. I think we may have discovered that Moxie may be from the Midwest, maybe around the Wisconsin area, where they pick up bags of bagels instead of bags of bagels.
Godwin was born sometime in the early Erdtree era. It's not clearly defined when. The Carian Academy is established, then Malekith seals destined death, and the Golden Order forms. Map of Lindell, Royal Capital. Map of the Royal Capital of Lindell and environs. Lindell, city of the Erdtree, is a metropolis enclosed by double ramparts. The inner wall remains unbreached to this day. Lindell was built, but something here is off. Maybe it's the giant dragon in the room, Gransax. What would cause him to attack the capital in this manner? Ancient Dragon Lightning Spear, a secret incantation of the ancient dragon cult, creates a spear of red lightning and stabs it into the ground above. On impact, the spear will burst into trails of lightning, covering the area. Spoken of in legend, red lightning is the weapon wielded by ancient dragons. Ancient Dragon Lightning Spear, unique skill, ancient lightning spear. Imbue the armament. Imbue the armament with the ancient dragon's red lightning, then throw it as a spear. Can be charged to increase its power. Incantations that channel the power of the ancient dragon, Fortisax. Creates 2 spears of red lightning and stabs them into the ground from above, one after another. On impact, each spear will burst into trails of lightning covering the area. During the War of the Ancient Dragons, these twin red lightning stakes were the hallmark of one ancient dragon who was called the mightiest boulder stone. To me, it seems like there's something weird going on with this red stuff. Perhaps the astrologers on the mountaintops of the giants gleaned some of this knowledge. Maybe they tapped the primeval current, an ephemeral silver that gives off a pale amber glow. What remains of a passing flash of starlight? If the stars command our fates, then amber-hued stars must command the fates of the gods. Such is the belief that inspired the use of these shards to prepare a most special draught. Cannot be
It's draft. Those are just one of those words where you only read it. So there's also like the kind of red like grace that you can find in the Forbidden Lands, which might be relevant to this. But I wouldn't necessarily be on board with saying like the golden hued starlight could be astrologer related, which I guess like when I think about it in like a when I'm like less detached from it, I guess I'll like walk it back and say maybe there is supposed to be, maybe not like supposed to be a connection, but maybe there could be a connection, I guess.
Consumed by mere humans. The eldest primeval sorcery, said to have been discovered by an ancient astrologer. A sorcery of legendary status, summons a dark cloud of stars overhead. Shortly after, the cloud will release a violent deluge of star rain. This sorcery can be cast while in motion. Charging increases potency, thought to be the founding glintstone sorcery. The glimpse of the primeval current that the astrologers saw became real, and the stars amber rained down on this land.
Yeah, it doesn't help that amber is referred to, or is used to refer to glintstone as well as like the literal amber of a tree and all that fun stuff. So does it literally mean like the tree's amber, the star's amber, or yeah?
and this might have pissed off the dragons. Gransax's bolt, spear whittled from the weapon wielded by Gransax, one of the legendary armament.
All right, so that's an interesting question. That wasn't phrased as a question. Could the introduction of glintstone have been what ticked off the dragons? That really does depend on like when glintstone came into Lands Between, and then also why it would take so long for the dragons to do it. No, I'm gonna say no, because I mean, I guess like the retaliation could have come like a long time after the fact, but you would have already needed Raya Lucaria to have been established as a Glintstone Academy if you believe the timeline of Gransax attacking Leyndell to have been when Radagon went to Liurnia. Hey Bella, nice to see you again.
A great ancient dragon, Gransax, once rained down calamity upon the royal capital, the only time in historical record that Leyndell's walls had fallen. This marked the dawn of the war against the ancient dragons. An incantation of Erdtree worship greatly increases the damage negation for caster and nearby allies. Hold to continue praying, delaying the effect. This incantation was used by the Knights of the Erdtree during the assault by the ancient dragon Gransax in the bitter war of the ancient dragons that followed. Gransax started the War of the Ancient Dragons. The general consensus I've derived from the community is that the War of the Ancient Dragons would take place during the Liurnian Wars, the First Liurnian War. Radagon's glory burned.
Scowleasy says they mean only one dragon uses sorceries. You know what? That's kind of interesting, and I'd never really thought about it that way. So, well, I guess technically more than one dragon uses sorceries, because isn't Smaragd like one or three dragons? No, there's Adula, so there's more than one dragon. I guess Smaragd doesn't actually use sorceries, and only Adula does. Because I was like, Smaragd uses like the, glintstone breath because she ate sorceries, but Adula does actually kind of use a sorcery. So my question now is, do dragons innately have the ability to use sorceries, or is it mostly because, the Rani thing that allowed that to happen? Because, most people can't use Dragon Communion incantations because they're too primal in nature, which seems like it should be antithetical to, the intellect-based usage of sorceries. So it's very interesting that Adula, as a dragon, can use those. Not that I think that dragon shouldn't be able to, but it is, yeah, that's just very interesting. Hail de Gusto, you missed the Craiglore indeed. And Glintstone Breath is an incantation when you use it. Yes. They go with the D&D tradition of some dragons learn sorcery and shapeshifting and learn it well within their long lifespans. Yeah. But just as far as how the two are dichotomized in Elden Ring, I'm kind of surprised I didn't think about it that way before. Smaragd seems to produce comets and crystals through biological means due to the diet. So yeah, I part of the reason why this is fascinating me is the whole diet aspect with Smaragd, and Adula's kind of throwing a wrench into things, because there's a weird connection between amber, as far as it being glintstone amber, star amber bullcrap, versus tree amber with the Halig tree amber and the Death Prince amber kind of essentially being the same thing. So it's very interesting that Smaragd at least needs to have first eaten glintstone to use glintstone, not sorceries, glintstone attacks. So they're different, but they're the same. It's so fascinating.
As red as his hair. The Second Liurnian War. No victory for the Golden, nor the Moon. no prize but atonement, the birth of a vow. What if this is alluding to Radagon being driven from the capital and being forced to figure something out? This definitely explains the rushed marriage, if you ask me. Their motivation? To unite in opposition to the ancient dragons. They needed something, anything, to defeat the dragons. Desperate? They both took their vows. This also explains why the capital would be pushing into Volcano Manor territory. The assault on Volcano Manor. The squalid, the sick, the blasphemous. A wretched, unending war with no glory. Gravelstone is also found.
All right, so that seems to be a misunderstanding of the text. The assault on Volcano Manor is a post-Shattering event, which is much later than the war with the ancient dragons and Radagon and being in Liurnia with Renala and all that. So it is unclear when the Volcano Manor came under the control, or if it was ever not under the control of like the Erdtree forces. I don't think there's really much to suggest otherwise, to be honest. And so somebody had said something. Oh yeah, Mr. Yada had said that dragons seem to absorb the traits of their surroundings into a power that is unique to them. I would disagree with that because Miranda flowers exhibit something similar going on, and this is a thing that is kind of covered in the description for soap. So a little bit on brand for us to talk about golden poop yesterday and then soap today, because these are two of the descriptions that I think are some of the most important in understanding some of the fundamental mechanics of a lot of the FromSoft games. So, Soap says, filth covering the exterior eventually seeps inside, soiling one's very spirit. So, this is kind of a lore mechanical explanation of a common JRPG trope that, you know, when you go into the snow area, you fight enemies that use ice attacks. When you go to the volcano area, you fight enemies that use flame attacks. Although when you think about it, it would almost seem like it would be more conducive for the life in those environments to have the opposite traits. That if you go to a cold area, it'd be advantageous to have like the fire stuff. So the whole idea of the exterior influencing the inside is, you know, very Darwinian in many ways, but it's kind of more metaphysical in Elden Ring and Dark Souls and all that. So things which exist in swamps eventually like get poisoned and muck inside, and that's even like the case in Elden Ring with like the, what are they called? Like the little centipede dudes, the followers of Rot, whatever they're called. The Miranda flowers are like another example. The Miranda flowers in Altus Plateau are like more golden. I don't remember if they actually have like different incantations or like a different kind of pollen. I meant to test that out. I think I did, but I don't remember if they actually had anything really different going on. There's the Scarlet Rot Miranda flowers that you can see in the Halig Tree area. I think there's a couple. Yeah, there's definitely a couple in Caelid as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in the Lands Between that really changes due to its environment. I guess you could make a case for like the rotting, shambling corpses. Some aren't possessed with poison. Some have scarlet rot. Others are just, you know, normal dudes, relatively speaking. So, yeah. All right. What about the ice dragons then? I think it's a similar thing. Okay, going back to the video.
Here, which could explain an alternative motivation. Perhaps a genocide of the ancient dragons. Not too sure about this one, but it does explain why the dragons would be angry enough to attack Lindell. There are more possible motives though. Let's continue. Near the Stormcaller Church, the routing of the ancient dragons, Godwyn the Golden fought to the last, earning the friendship of the dread Fortisax. Here's the Japanese translation from Mubeto and his community. The ground of the ancient dragon war, Godwyn the Gold fights valiantly, becomes comrade to the ancient dragon Fortisax. Today I learned, routing means to get got, kid. Some of the ancient dragons lived. Some of the corpses of the ancient dragons were crafted into powerful weapons. The dragon Great Claw. Weapon said to have been whittled from the claw of a great ancient dragon, wielded by grotesque tree sentinels who yet serve the Erdtree. The claw is enwreathed with lightning, and tears through the dragon's feeble descendants with ease. Dragon Claw Shield. Great shield said to have been whittled from the claw of a great ancient dragon, wielded by grotesque tree sentinels who yet serve the Erdtree, imbued with lightning. They had other ways of combating the lightning as well. Incantation of Two Fingers Faithful. Increases lightning damage negation. This incantation can be cast while in motion. Follow the path that has been set before you, and you will make enemies of all others, the monks, the sorcerers, ancient dragon knights, the scions of gold. Heed me, the lands between offers no welcome to the tarnished. Okay, so there's this one item that I feel like alludes to a second attack on Leyndell because, well, it's brief. Lightning Strike. One of the incantations of the capital's ancient dragon cult. Summons a bolt that scatters and spreads around the surrounding area. This incantation can be cast repeatedly. Ancestors of the modern dragons, the ancient dragons had scales of gravelstone and wielded lightning as their weapon. It is said that they once attacked Leyndell, the royal capital. It's the "it is said" for me, fam. So,
Oh, here we go.
we're speculating, and you damn well know we are. The first attack could have ended the Age of Plenty, way back before they shackled the Omen. The Erdtree once flourished with abundance, yet it was only for a fleeting moment. Such is the course of all life. The tree is split, and this allows us entrance into a hollow tree. While scrolling through videos of trees on fire, as one does, I saw this video by Dylan Anderson.
This guy saw this tree in a forest on fire only on the inside. This tree was struck by lightning, and when lightning passes through the tree, the sappy interior is a better conductor than the wood, causing a fire from just within.
On one hand, this would explain a whole lot of the context of the Lands Between. Explains why the sap stopped dripping and why the tree stopped fruiting. This places the attack by Gransax much farther back in the timeline, which, depending on how each Tarnished sees the timeline, can be controversial. On the other hand, it could have been a completely different attack, covered up by the royal capital because they didn't want anyone to know that the trees stopped producing sap. But okay. Forget that idea. I have another. But we are really going to crackpot territory.
Yeah, this is something that I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm totally fine with the presentation of it, especially since it's being very clear that it's like a crackpot theory. Because at the very least, it's definitely more food for thought. Yeah, this would explain. I thought that. Okay, you guys aren't the only ones that caught it. Trees also tend to explode spectacularly when hit by lightning, and they fling out their golden seeds too, don't they?
The devs do invite this kind of speculation and theorizing, so hear me out. I was scrolling through the Elden Ring wiki, as one does, and I just so happened to land on the theory page, as one does. It's funny because the question I was pursuing was being posed, but then what they added to this question lived in my head rent-free for a couple of days. Quote, was there a war with the dragons both long ago and after the founding of the Golden Order and the defeat of the giants? Or does the ambiguous nature of the timeline reflect the special association between the dragons and the storm outside of time? This question stayed in my head like super rent-free. Speculating once again. What if the ancient dragons have the power to use the storm outside of time and this is how they charge their attacks? So, like, what would happen if you were to hypothetically plunge an unalloyed gold pole charged with a bajillion volts of powerful primordial electricity into the roots of the tree?
The most ultimate falcon punch in the history of the Lands Between.
For this, I turned
Extra
to
life
none
jump
other
scare,
than
I
my
know,
husband,
right?
Charlie, who was a naval electrician. So, Charlie, What happens when a large amount of electricity goes through a golden pole and is plunged into the ground?
Interesting line of questioning. Gold is an excellent conductor of electricity, and wood is not. Gold is one of nature's best conductors, and can keep cool under massive electrical loads. Wood conducts electricity in a more catastrophic manner. Alright, yeah, let's keep going. Alright. After the initial damage is dealt by Gransax's ancient spear, several things happen. The path of least resistance is found through the tree. A flash forms. 300 million volts begins to flow from the trunk, through the roots, and into the earth. Poor conductors like lignin fibers, tree stuff, heat up, combust, and vaporize. If matter cannot evacuate fast enough, an explosion ensues. In less than a second, the transfer ceases. Light fades, and superheated air collapses upon itself in a massive thunderclap. A massive electrical surge like this could create a large incinerated cavern, like the one we enter within the Erdtree. It's capable of far greater destruction. Any organic compounds are immediately incinerated in a blaze of 50,000 degrees American, leaving a massive chamber, charred and sterile. Charred and sterile. Could anything survive? Ooh.
Alright. So, this explanation could lend to why the tree is hollow and split. In addition, it could have
So, alright, I'll let her continue a little bit.
laid the ground for Deathroot to take hold. So before we get to all the fun stuff, we have to start with the most boring and middle of the road explanations. So let's talk.
Okay, I'll back that up a little bit. So, the idea of the tree stuff going into the ground if it was struck by lightning is very fascinating and a little bit compelling, because Altus Plateau, in comparison to, any other continents or whatever you want to call them in lands between, is the one that is most flush with gold, and that could make a lot of sense if that gold came from the Erdtree as a kind of rebound effect. So that's a very interesting theory for that aspect of, lightning and stuff. However, unfortunately, to compare real life gold with the gold of Elden Ring, while it's tempting, I'm not sure how relevant it really is, because gold is lightning in Elden Ring. So it's, I just don't know. Like, I don't fully disagree. It's a real pain in the ass.
To start with the most boring and middle of the road explanations. So let's talk motivation, starting with the most generic, and then we go to the most outrageous and crackpot. So, alright. Gransax could have crash landed in the Leyndell by accident. And this is just funny to think about. Like, Gransax accidentally started a war because he's clumsy. This point seems easily refuted because he stares up at the Erdtree, kind of conveying this feeling like, look what I did. There's nothing you can do about it. It's possible it's just an accident, but it could have been a different kind of fumble. Perhaps he accidentally went too far back in time to kill Godwin, thus slamming into the capital and accidentally starting war. He could have also hated the Erdtree.
And a reminder, this is not the most crackpot theory yet, apparently.
And wanted to destroy it from within. The desire for Gransax to attack the capital in this way, perhaps, was the way in which the tyrant Marika was making decisions. And perhaps they wanted to cause mortal harm to the Erdtree because of what it stood for. It does seem like there was a hierarchy that the humans were blatantly ignoring. The hierarchy being dragons, then beastmen, then humans.
So Scowlezy asks, are there any mentions of mining gold out of the ground? Like, where does all this gold come from? Sort of, depending on how you feel about smithing stones specifically. But nothing about just mining actual gold. So, right. And where does all this gold come from? Likely runes? Yeah.
Alternatively, there could have been something weird happening
Or grace.
with the Newman where they summoned down the meteor showers and broke off Bamboozled. This would make the dragons very angry, especially if Bamboozled was once located